It is time to revisit one of your favorite on-again, off-again relationships. That is the one that you have with me via this MP3 file, which you subscribe to using an RSS feed, whether you know it or not. Or you use YouTube. Or maybe you're just a weirdo who uses a web browser to go to my website and then clicks the little built-in player. But you probably, RSS is involved, is the point. My name is Justin Searles. This is a production that I call Breaking Change. Every now and then, shit breaks. I gotta cut a breaking release, something that's never happened before. Version 19 was one of our most stable releases because I did not have time to record anything to talk to you for like 3 weeks. Not for, lack of wanting. I wanted to, trust me. I can't make it more than a few days without wanting to spout off about something. I've actually gone through several crests and naders of outrage and interest and excitement about a whole bunch of different topics. But alas, duty calls, and I'm pulling double duty right now, as it were, because I'm both supporting the launch of a software product. There was the crunch to get everything all ready and all the kind of, bits and bobs arranged correctly so that on launch day it would work. And then there was the immediate aftermath of little support issues that kind of came up here and there. Then there's the game that I play mentally of whether I categorize any of those issues as bugs or whether I, pawn off responsibility and blame somebody else. You'll never guess which one I chose for the two issues that did come up. Then separate and apart from that is the conference talk that I'm very steeped in the middle of building right now. So that's my excuse. That's why I have been truant from this nonsensical responsibility that I have created in my life. As usual, all of my problems are of my own invention. But this is, what I think about this podcast? I think this podcast is a good problem to have, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm glad because I get to connect with people like you. I got a lot of emails over the last few weeks from listeners that were frustratingly, as a mailbag maintainer's perspective, like they weren't actually like for the mailbag. They were like earnest, like, hey, tell me more about this and how do you do this, kind of like almost somewhere open source help desk sort of thing, somewhere like, I had one person ask about, discovery testing and my sort of very, very unique and special test-driven development approach that I used to spend a lot of time talking about. So, yeah, I feel this connection. And that's why I am pleased to bring you version 20 of Breaking Change, titled Mandatory Stealth. And it's going to be a double meaning, but let's let things play out first. There's a lot going on, and also I'm kind of still under the gun. So every minute that I spend podcasting is a minute that I'm not spending hustling. Now that I have a startup with my spouse, and I've learned only a handful of things, but one of them is that I have to always be hustling. So I don't love it, but I'm in a rush. Not a lot of life news, because there's a lot to talk about. I normally keep a list of what life news I want to talk about, and when I opened up my podcast list this morning, I'm speaking to you Saturday, September 14th, 2024. The only thing in the life section was my guava juice fermented in the bottle. It's a direct quote. At nighttime, I play video games. I watch TV. That's how I wind down. I've got a beverage fridge behind me. It's a super cheap one. I like it because the compressor just hisses at this really high frequency at all hours. And I never really put my finger on what the thing that is driving me insane is until it's been going off for 45 minutes. And I'm like, yes, that is why I am low level angry right now. And in that beverage fridge, I keep a, variety of ingredients and concoctions to, for want of a wet bar. My dream would be to install a wet bar, a proper bar upstairs next to our theater. But my plumber tells me I can't afford it, given the layout of the house and the amount of concrete that he'd have to rip through. So in that beverage fridge, I've got some cans of soda. I've got some Soda Stream bottles that are chilled, so I can make some soda water really quickly. And when I say Soda Stream, it's a Soda Stream retail product that you have seen at Bed Bath & Beyond. If you're old enough to have remembered Bed Bath & Beyond, I don't think they still exist. I think they're all Spirit Halloweens now. I think. I don't know. If you've been to a Bed Bath & Beyond recently, or if you just got a stack of those 20% coupons that you're saving for the end times on the theory that maybe that'll be like the equivalent of bottle caps, that post-apocalypse when the dollar is worthless, all we're doing is trading in Bed Bath & Beyond expired coupons, or coupons that never expire. If you got the OG stuff, that's what's going to be worth it, right? Because they started printing expiration dates at some point on the coupons, even though they'd still take the coupons and maybe give you half the credit. So anyway, it's a Soda Stream machine, but because the little canisters, you get 30 liters or whatever of soda. That's not nearly like the amount of effort to go and swap out these canisters, and the expense is so high so as to be like cost competitive with just buying fucking Coca-Cola. It never made any sense to me. And so instead, we, thanks to my brother, he hooked me up with first a 15 pound, and now I've got like a 20 or 25 pound, whatever the most standard size CO2 tank is. And so I go to Air Gas, twice a year, pick up 2 gigantic CO2 canisters like I'm running a restaurant. I actually have an account with them as if I were a restaurant. Thanks, Searles LLC. And I swap out for 2 full ones. I precariously drive home as they jostle in the back of my Ford Escape. And then I plug them into a Soda Stream via an adapter, and that is how I have lots and lots of soda water every night. Well, anyway, I like soda water, but I get bored if I'm just drinking carbonated water with no additives. And one that I like to do is I'll just pick a fruit juice, and I'll just a little something, just enough on top to give me the essence of flavor, similar to LaCroix, I guess, just like a little skosh. And I bought this guava juice from Costco, and it's really strong. It's probably really sweet. I only use a little tiny bit, and it's Costco, so it's like 64 ounces. And so it's probably been there for a couple months. And I don't think about things like juice expiring, but I noticed that there was like a leak on the floor from the fridge, and I thought maybe that was a malfunction or whatever because I hadn't been in there. And no, instead it was the guava plastic bottle had some sort of fermentation had happened, and it was it's a very thick plastic. It does not look highly recyclable, but it is warping. It is so expanded. So I precariously pull it out of the fridge. I've seen this movie before. Becky ironically bought some canned mocktails a few years ago that the brand Kin, K-I-N, and it's if you've ever seen the branding for any of this like wellness schlock of it's not alcoholic. It's like, these, it's like borderline essential oily in terms of like kind of like got this aromatherapy, like, oh, we're gonna enhance your whatever with these aromatic, herbal cocktails. So it's a way for them to try to market a thing that can cost almost as much as a canned cocktail, but contain none of the good part of the canned cocktail, because all you feel afterwards is kind of full. Anyway, Becky bought a few of those cans, and similar story, they started fucking exploding. They were in the pantry and they just exploded. And it happened once and we're like, oh, that's a fluke. And then it happened again. And then pretty soon they were all warped and expanding. And I took a fucking fingernail off, because after a certain point you realize that like these non-alcoholic mocktail cans are now actually probably extremely alcoholic, because they're all just unbelievably fermented. And I decided to proactively release the pressure. And in the kitchen, over the sink, with like a little bit of a splash guard, I opened each one and aimed it at the kitchen sink drain. And there was so much pressure, it just ripped the fucking index fingernail right up, right where the tab was, It was too much. And still, I'm looking at it now and realizing I kind of have 9 months later or whatever. Over a year later, I guess. Yeah. That's just getting older, I guess. It's you collect these scars, these war stories of all the heroic acts in your life. And that's when I tried to save my pantry from more sticky alcoholic mocktails. So anyway, same story. Second verse, same as the first. I come downstairs with this guava thing, and instead of a can, it's a gigantic warping plastic. This is a several pound quantity. And I'm really worried that this is going to turn into some kind of cluster bomb. But also it was late and I was tired and I was not thinking super hard about it. So I opened up the guava juice very carefully, it's like unscrewed just a little bit. And as soon as any amount of air came in or got out, thing took off like a fucking rocket, hits the goddamn like fridge 8 feet away, and just sputters in a fucking circle. And of course, like Becky's in bed already and I'm looking around and now it's dark and everything's sticky and my, so that was a fun time. That's my big life update. I did clean up the kitchen. I don't think Becky was none the wiser. She's learning about this now. Sorry, Becky. So if you're wondering why like your socks got sticky the next morning a couple weeks ago, that was probably it. I don't know that there's anything else to talk about. I mean, that's how interesting your life is when you're just heads down working all day, I guess. Everything else is pretty straightforward. I'm looking forward to being done with Rails World, this conference talk that I'm working on. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But first, I guess that means if there's nothing else in life to talk about, it's time for follow-up. So when I say mandatory stealth, this stealth this was optional stealth, right? We soft launched Build with Becky, which is the first paid subscription module in the Better with Becky family of brands. And if you're clever and you can think of the URL, feel free to go find it and sign up. In fact, knock yourself out. But we're not publicly sharing it just yet, because we've got a group of sort of trusted testers, as Google used to call people, who we know, who are working on it, who are using it, and soliciting their feedback. And we're also in the middle of kind of like nailing down marketing message, getting the marketing landing page set up. And where my head's at mostly is this Rails World talk, which is fundamentally about the application. So there's a lot of like last minute tweaks, and that's got to get done because that's got a hard date of September 26th, I think, is when I'm speaking. So we're in this sort of stealth mode where we're quasi launched, but not talking about it publicly and just sort of testing the waters. But like fun, from a software perspective, it's all there. It all works. It's been working there since like, late August, really. I have very little analytics up because I kind of don't care what people are doing with the app. I'm curious to know if they're using it for sure, but it's, if you couldn't tell, I was being sarcastic or facetious about the idea that we'd be hustling all the time. The goal of building this application is to have made this cool thing available for those who want it. And I think from a marketing perspective going forward, it's going to be mostly coming from a place from Becky, of course, because it's her business. Coming from a place of, here are messages of what I'm all about and how I believe that, strength training should be, how I think that why a lot of people fail at it, targeting especially like experiences of women and people who've been through similar things as Becky. Sharing that perspective openly, honestly, authentically, in as many mediums as possible in a way that is very countercultural, definitely will resonate with people who are sick of the never-ending Instagram feed of, fitfluencers and, products that promise, easy, quick results, and a lot of the body image shaming shit. I think this is going to be more like a slow food movement for her. And so as a result, it kind of wouldn't make sense for us to try to growth hack it, and create a big marketing funnel full of all the same scammy tricks. So, it'll probably grow organically. I could see us launching like a referral service, nothing at launch, but like some, you know what I mean, right? Like trying to get people to use it, realize it's really good. You realize it's totally unlike anything else that's available from a fitness software perspective. And there's a whole lot of reasons why, and I'm excited to talk about that in the talk, but initial reviews are, yes, this is interesting. This is good. This is way better than a Patreon or something that's just a bunch of PDFs every month of a new fitness program. So that's neat. Not, like I said, not a lot else to talk about there because it's stealth. You see, I have a lot of stuff that I'd say about it, but it's stealth. And I can't talk about it because I'm being very stealthy. No one's supposed to know about this. So just remember, by listening to this podcast, you are now under a friend DA with me, not to tell anyone about this app, not to try to guess the URL, not to sign up, not to pay $30 a month. But you totally can if you want, because that's fine, because who cares? None of this fucking matters. Another follow-up. So I was talking about my new iPad last time, the M4. I like it a lot. It's very good. It's light enough that I actually use it and walk around the house with it. Even like, I took it yesterday to work on this talk with the pencil, and I didn't bring the Magic Keyboard case. It was just in my backpack, and it was super nice to have, to have a computing device in a backpack and not feel it there, right, with whatever else was in the backpack because it was so light. It reminded me of the glory of the 12-inch MacBook. One of the things that I was debating about this iPad computer was whether or not I was going to sign in with my normal iCloud account or use one of my throwaway iCloud accounts so as to promote focus, eliminate distractions. I wouldn't have iMessage. I wouldn't necessarily have as many ways to communicate with other people. It'd be more locked down. And that's really worked for me in the past. But in this case, because I'm doing like a lot more long form work and productivity stuff, it's hard to get through a bunch of to-dos if you don't have access to your mail and whatnot. So I wrote a few shortcuts, super short, super tiny automations in the Shortcuts app. And I wanted to share that with you because I thought you might find this useful for yourself. You can conditionally make automations in Shortcuts. You could say, like, for example, when this focus mode is active, or when I'm in this location, or from this time to this time, if I do X, and then X could be a whole number of triggers. If I start a workout, if I open an app, right? If battery reaches this level, then do, and then the then do could be any shortcut or a range of other actions. And so I do this one that I call rubber banding, which is, in my case, anytime I open the Messages app, it will automatically send me back to the home screen. Because I have the habit, of course, of like, I'll open up Messages and I'll get distracted and I'll catch myself just like getting in a whole bunch of back and forth chats. I'm enlightened enough to have no other social media or no other kind of like, short form way to just chit chat with people and get distracted. But if I did, I'd set up rubber band for that too, to kind of, train myself out of it. And by rubber band, I mean two things. Like one, both the habit building trend in the 80s and 90s of a literal rubber band and then just snapping yourself every time that you needed to hold yourself accountable to something, but also because you'll just open an app and then see it immediately for like maybe a split second, and then it goes and zips right back down to the dock. I found that to be plenty for me. So when I'm on the iPad, I'm still very successfully monotasking, staying on task, and the Mac is a lot of things and it's really wonderful. But if I'm not on the Vision Pro, which has got this sort of like overwhelming 130-inch screen in front of me, and that really helps. That the immersion helps me focus. But if I'm just like leaning over a MacBook, I really still, I don't know. I'm just, something about Twitter in 2009 to 2014, like that period, just completely rotted my brain against deep focused work. So I'm getting a lot better, but I still need habits like that. So I thought you might like that little trick. So if you have an app that you're a little bit too sticky to, addicted to, don't want to be using quite so much, highly recommend you look at shortcuts and setting up an automation just to force quit it. Maybe a certain time of day, maybe if you don't want to look at Twitter after work or whatever. What's Twitter? I wrote a newsletter about my favorite software team that I was a part of back in 2010. And it was, so if you haven't read my newsletter or signed up before, it's at justin.searles.co/newsletter. And the point of the newsletter was really to talk about like the limits of remote work. Here are some experiences that I don't think I could have had remotely and that I'm very grateful that I had in person. And unsurprisingly, maybe a lot of those things are the transformative experiences that are really important, especially at the beginning of a career or when you're learning a brand new thing, because it's to be in person with somebody, especially if it's a really healthy team, a lot of collaboration, a shared goal, vision, values. The higher the bandwidth communication, including in person and nonverbal, the more that you could hope to have conveyed in a short period of time. There was an aspect of that newsletter too that was really just, kind of like, here's how fucking awesome this team was. And I had an old colleague read it and reach out, and he said, I just always felt like I'd never live up to your standards. And he didn't say it in a critical way, but it is a criticism that I've heard a lot of, that people who've worked with me felt that I would never feel like they were good enough or give them my approval. And it was one of the things, I think I know why it happens. It was one of the things about, especially once I became a founder and then an employer, and then like an employer who'd been employing long enough that there's like multiple generations of employee or layers between me and somebody else, that the implicit power dynamic comes with, I believe, a responsibility for the leader to inspire, to support, to encourage, and to, in many cases, I think, put some reassurances around expectations to people who might otherwise just stress themselves out and feel like they're never good enough, right? A lot of people walk around all day feeling like they're not good enough, and they take that to that leads them to an outcome that is not good, right? So like, you walk around, if you feel like you're not enough, you feel like you're not good enough, I've seen people, and I've felt this way too, I can relate, like you just feel miserable and you're demotivated, you're listless, you feel worthless, and then it just kind of, it's a negative spiral, the reason that, apart from never kind of like setting out to be a manager or a leader of people in that way, or waking up every morning with that being the mindset of that's what my job is, you know, it was always a thing that I had to be reminded of, sometimes in the moment of an awkward or difficult conversation. I think for me, the issue is that I have a naturally healthy separation between the work and my self-identity. I don't know why that is. I guess I could hypothesize why that is, but just to say first, I believe I'm enough. I believe I'm great. I love myself. I think I'm awesome. Yada yada. I don't think I'm better than other people. I just, I've always had a positive disposition about me as a human. A little too positive, sure. Sometimes I'm a little too slow to take the blame myself. Whenever I fuck up at all, I feel tremendously guilty. And I think one of the reasons I feel so guilty is because I hold myself in high regard, which is a sort of like inverted way to typically think about it, right? When I'm hard on myself, it's because I have such high expectations of myself, not because I see myself negatively. And so those two things I think we often confuse, right? Because like they look the same from the outside. But for me, I like myself. At the same time, I am fully comfortable like acknowledging that I'm really bad at most things I do. I can feel a lot of pressure about that. I can feel all sorts of negative shit, and I'm sure you've seen or heard or read me expressing something that came from a place of, oh my god, I'm never going to ship this in time, or I'm going to get called out as an idiot, or I'm not going to be able to pay the bills, or the company's going to go sideways, or whatever it is. That energy is always there, but it's not a matter of identity for me. It's just like, that's where I am with the work. And so when the way that I approach work is, even once I've gotten pretty good at something, it's in my mind, getting better is an asymptotic goal. I will never, there's not a Boolean state of not good and good. There is a starting point, which is usually somewhere around not good, and a infinitely long journey of getting hopefully better over time. And the idea that I would ever be good enough at a thing, right? I'm good enough, sure. Again, separating identity, it's really hard. Maybe I'm over-focused on that, but I feel like a lot of the last 10 years of sort of pop workplace psychology have overemphasized the link between identity and activity here. I'm really just saying, when I sit down to write some code, it is never good enough because it is definitionally not good enough, because I believe whatever I'm doing and whatever discipline I'm doing it could always be better. And that extends even to yes, let's say I write the perfect code, the unimpeachable, absolutely, it is the perfect implementation to solve a problem. It has no downsides. Even if I do that, it's still not good enough because I could have done it faster, or I could have done it in a way that was more reusable, right? Or I could have done it in a way where I'd communicated what I was doing to myself or to my colleagues sooner, and in a way that was more helped them plan, right? So even if I have the big eureka moment at the end of 2 weeks of struggle and everything works out perfectly, it's those 2 weeks of struggle that I would then look at and be like, how could I change how I'm thinking or approaching it so that I get at that best outcome faster? And so again, this is a sort of counterintuitive thing, because a lot of people will hear what I'm saying and say, oh, he's a perfectionist, and so he never ships anything and he doesn't get anything done. It's no, I think a perfectionist is somebody who shares that belief that things are never as good as they could be. But typically when we, have that negative association or connotation with the word perfectionist, what we're really talking about is a specific subset of those people who have a unhealthy relationship with time, commitment, expectations, right? So if yes, people who believe that things should always be better and they're always striving to like make everything absolutely perfect, and they also have no regard for extrinsic constraints like timeline and budget, yeah, that is obnoxious and that is a problem, and it's counterproductive in all kinds of ways. And so whenever you talk about like a perfectionist at work and how they're, an issue, that's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying like time is one of the variables. And so when I'm rating myself in terms of like how well am I doing right now and how could I be better, at this point in my career, 80% of that is about how do I make the most of my time? Either how do I get more done? How do I do things in the right, like in a better order to get me where I'm going faster? So if that's my mindset, right? If that's my ideology, and it's like, this is like big individual contributor vibes, I'm sure, because it's all about me, my own headspace, and how I'm optimizing as a single worker bee. It is really hard for me to mentally switch gears to an entirely different ideology that reassures other people by saying, hey, no, what you just did is good enough. Because it's not good enough. Nothing is ever good enough. We're all striving, or we should be, to do as well as we fucking can. And then some. Like, actually, I misspoke, right? It's not about doing as well as you can. It's about, like, that's table stakes for me. Of course, I assume everyone's doing as well as they can every time, but however well that is, after you did the thing, should come some retrospection of how do we do better next time? And yeah, there should be a moment for a high five or a celebration. But if your personal needs are met, your self-concept is healthy, you love yourself, you feel secure, you shouldn't need that much. Should is a strong word, I guess. I find myself that I don't need that much of the reassurance, the validation, the mollycoddling in the form of, no, that's good enough. Don't worry about it. It's okay. And I suspect a lot more people do. And this is one way people are different. But it is so foreign to my built-in way of thinking is what I'm trying to say, that it's very, very difficult for me to just be having this relationship between myself and my work where it's like, it could always be better. And I've gotten very good at identifying the ways it could be better and a pathway to get from where I am to how to make it better. And then how to increase the speed of the feedback loop or the fidelity of that feedback so that I'm not only like, it's the difference between velocity and acceleration, right? Velocity is how fast are you going right now? And sure, 90 miles an hour is faster than 70 miles an hour. But acceleration is, velocity squared, where it's like, like how much faster am I getting each year? Like that is where my focus typically is. Again, focusing on speed because that's kind of my top priority at this stage in my career. Early on, it was just survive, figure out how to write code that worked at all ever. And in the middle years of my career to date, it was figure out how to do all these things without support so that I could build a fully functioning software application by myself. So yeah, if you've ever worked with me or had that experience where you're like, man, nothing's ever good enough for him, it's like, damn straight, nothing's ever good enough. There's no such thing as good enough. There's good enough within constraints, I guess. But even then, it could always be better. And I think that's a healthy way to look at the work. Because if it was ever truly good enough, then what are you just doing? Punching in a clock and shipping some widgets? I personally always need something to strive for. And rather than look out to the world to strive for like the next level, like I want to become an L5 staff engineer or some shit. No, like that. I'm challenging myself. I make my own fun. And that's between me and my brain and what I'm able to do. So anyway, check out my newsletter. It's not about that. Still not snoring very much. That's the snoring follow-up, at least according to the app. Becky has, whenever I tell her, hey, I'm not snoring anymore, she's like, you're still kind of snoring, so it's fair. I do feel like tracking my macronutrients every day, I've dropped probably 7 pounds or so in the last 2 months. I'm leaner, meaner. I suspect the body recomposition has helped a fair amount on the snoring front. Nasal passages are more clear, feel better in the morning. It's all good. Could also just be that like we had a really bad pollen season and now that's gone. I don't know. I hate multivariate problems like that. So that's the snoring update for hopefully the last one for a while. I know y'all love hearing about. I should just record myself snoring and have that be the outro music. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. Let's see. One side note, I don't know if you're on social media, but if you're in like the programmer-y community of people who in 2022, especially after Mastodon became big because Elon was buying Twitter and everyone rightfully was concerned. So a lot of people move to Mastodon and then say they're deleting their Twitter accounts. They're never going back. They're never giving Elon a dime. That this is white supremacists and using relatively, if not hyperbolic, at least stark language, not just about him or whatever, but like, hey, if you're still on Twitter, you're part of the problem and yada yada yada. I'm seeing an increasing number of those same people on Mastodon who tend to be insufferably sanctimonious. They're back on Twitter and they've got the blue check because they paid Elon money to get more reach on Twitter. So seeing a lot more of them around lately. And look, if you're on Twitter and you're paying Elon and you never, had an issue with his evil, fine. I don't care. That's fine. At least you're consistent. It's these people who I saw lording over others and acting like more holy than thou over in the Mastodon swimming pool. And now they're back in the Twitter ocean more and they're paying for Twitter Blue or X, whatever they call it. X Blue? I don't know. Sounds like a chewing tobacco. Yeah. So hypocrite alert. Don't be that guy. I'd say don't be that person, but it's always a guy. Another follow-up. I mentioned few versions ago that AAA VR gaming has mostly died because there's not the audience. It doesn't do the kind of unit sales that it would need to justify the development expense. It's sort of in a similar state to AAA gaming on iPhone and iPad, where you had recently, like Ubisoft probably gets this port funded by Apple because it's part of a keynote a year ago or whatever, where the Assassin's Creed Mirage game, which is like their current generation Assassin's Creed that launched last year, they put that on iPhone. And then there was a report that like it only sold like a few thousand copies total to a billion iPhone users, because it turns out no one wants to pay $50 for an iPhone game. And the people who would want to play Assassin's Creed Mirage probably had either already played 6 months ago, or they would want to do it with a controller and, a big enough screen to really appreciate the graphical fidelity. And so similar to how mobile platforms are vexed against attracting AAA games that aren't little slot machines of microtransactions, VR is kind of stuck in the same, nebula of all that it really attracts are rinky-dink little 5-minute experiences and stuff, as opposed to really deep immersive experiences, which you totally are possible, right? Like the number of people that I've talked to who have set up a PC VR rig so that they could play like Skyrim or Fallout 4 or No Man's Sky or some other nearly decade-old game that just happens to have a good VR mode. And then to spend hundreds of hours in those worlds because they're so convincing, right? Like there's clearly a a capability there. It just hasn't found fit with a market. So a few versions ago, I was saying, hey, it'd be really great if Epic or some engine maker would just add a checkbox to the export to say, hey, like also include a VR build. Because pretty much any first-person game, sure, you wouldn't have motion controls, you'd be using a gamepad, but pretty much any first-person game with like a high level of fidelity, in theory, should be able to be played in VR with minimal amounts of fuss, especially if the engine is the thing that's kind of doing all the math and the hard work for you and providing some help in terms of the UX. Well, we're not there yet, but somebody released a Cyberpunk VR mod that is surprisingly good. And this isn't a recommendation because I haven't played it yet, but I watched a couple of YouTubes of people playing it. And the Cyberpunk by CD Projekt Red, had a terrible launch initially, but the between making it better over the course of years and patches, the level of graphical fidelity and artwork is so high that even when you're playing on a screen or playing in, at a distance, looking at a television, it's really hard to even see a lot of the incredible and rich graphical detail and artwork up close. Whereas if you're playing in VR, it's like, holy crap, this is like a whole world. And so that now what I'm hearing is like people of that ilk who've been red pilled to what it's like to live in like a AAA VR experience are now going back to the well with Cyberpunk VR. And because it's just one dude modding, it makes me really feel like, of course that experience I'm sure has like lots of rough edges and stuff because it's not properly supported. But I just wonder how long it's going to be in the wilderness. If it's just never coming back, if we're 10 years away, if we're 15 years away, the superiority of the experience is so stark. And it's fiddly. It's expensive. It requires like a stable place to be typically, and I don't know. There's just a part of me, whenever something is that fucked and that doomed for that long, and I want to see it exist so badly, there's a part of me that's always like, what if I did something about it? What if I made something happen? What could I do? And the reason I'm talking about this on the podcast is I'm hoping that like talking about it on the podcast is enough to soothe that part of me so that I don't go and spend a lot of money and 2 years of my life trying to figure out how to crack the nut on AAA gaming in VR. Because it sounds like a futile quest that would end in tragedy. Only other real follow-up here, talking about talking. I'm going to be given this conference talk about the project of building Becky's Build with Becky application at Rails World. The title of the talk is The Empowered Programmer. And I'm in the throes of format, message. I've gone through 3 or 4 different outlines. A couple of people did write in and say that they wanted to hear more about my talk writing process. One of the things when I'm writing a talk, and I've said this many times, is as long as I know that I have the commitment, I will start a to-do list or some bucket that I can just throw every single errant thought into. And I will eventually come back and triage those and throw away 80% of them. But then I'll work up an outline of, hey, here's a way that I could bucket the overall patterns that I'm seeing into maybe 5 points or 3 points, or here's connective tissue, or here's a motif that like visually I could use this as an anchor, right? Of there's one about test suites where I was like testing end to end and also testing like at the unit level. And it was only a couple years after the video game Spore had come out, where you start as like a single cell organism and you work up to like interplanetary. And then there's all these gradations in the middle. And so I kind of mimicked that with like a plus minus Google Earth zoom bar at the side, where you're like, up close, here's how the tests look. And at the middle ranges, here's how the tests look. And at the maximum zoom level, here's what it looks like. So I think about that kind of stuff, and all of this is in flight. And there's a mistake that I typically make, which is I start building. I sit down with Keynote. I come up with, maybe some colors and fonts, and I start building out slides. And I create assets that mirror maybe the second or third draft of that outline. And then I start shoving in points. And then about halfway through the act of shoving in points, I realize that what I really want to say is a little bit different. And then I've got pride of authorship, and I'm now married to the sunk cost of like, well, this is my structure and this is the art, and I've already got this done. I'm not going to throw it all away. That's how you wind up being me and having these talks that are like ostensibly 40 minutes long, but I've got 50, 55 minutes of content. And then I'm just practicing and practicing and practicing to try to get the runtime down. And I've done this so many times that you'd think I'd learned the lesson. So yesterday was actually a really productive day. I spent most of this week recording demo videos that I knew, hey, this is the 6 demos that I'm going to have in the app. This is the 6 areas where I'm going to be showing off what this does, what this does, what this does. I'm going to documenting in advance. I'm going to freeze here, freeze here, freeze here, for making specific points about specific technologies or about techniques or design decisions. Those demos are all recorded, and that was probably the hardest part. I say that now. I'm sure when I'm trying to shove all these into Keynote, that'll be its own issue. I started yesterday morning to experiment with different, artwork approaches for the Keynote itself. And I was really, really just like rudderless. I didn't feel like I had traction on like, how do I take these demos and make this story make any more sense than just, hey, here's a demo of this thing, soup to nuts with a lot of like little lessons in the middle. And for the first time in a long ass time, I actually had the foresight to stop work, to shut my laptop, throw away the Keynote file early. I'd only invested a couple hours, and took the day, got a good workout in, sat around, went to the pool, came back, iPad pencil, and I forced myself to think about a structure that would be thematically on point, that would give visual cues for the attendees to be able to see where we're at and why, to connect what those demos do and what the technology that they're built with is with the broader theme of that section. And I feel like I landed in a really good place. And so whenever I'm doing something creative, I always feel like, well, you better start chiseling the fucking block of marble, because the faster you chisel, the sooner you'll be done. When in reality, the concept is so much more important. Having a really, really clear vision of knowing what you're going to do, but as importantly, being excited about it. So you have this explosive energy that you're just like, I can't hold me back. I got to go do it. I'm only doing this podcast now out of a sense of obligation to you, the listener. And also because it's moments like this that I often forget about, and I want to record it. I want to say, like, one of the worst things you can do for a creative project is to start building too early when you should still be thinking. So I'm glad that I had the good thinking time, because now I do have clarity. I do have excitement. And I think that the building of the thing will go a lot faster than if I were to kind of force it, just to try to view it as another task list of just getting stuff done. So I'm hopeful. I've got, 12 days to figure this shit out. Just not a lot of days, I'm realizing, as I say that. So it's healthy pressure, some urgency. That's probably all I have to say about the talk. If you're coming to Rails World, I hope that you'll come say hi. Shoot me an email, podcast@sirils.co, and let me know. We can look out for each other. A couple of you've already chimed in to mention you'll be there, and I look forward to seeing you. All right, so that's all I got to say, and that means it's time for time to entertain our friend, our hero, Aaron Patterson. Aaron will also be at Rails World. He's going to give the closing keynote, a tradition that he's been doing at, front-running Rails conferences for many years now. He's very good at it. He's a great speaker. He's a great programmer. He's contributed a lot. But nothing that Aaron does is nearly as significant as the laughs that he's shared with us along the way, including the ones that he contributes to this program, which is a pun that he texts me every time I ask for him. I say, "Hey, Aaron, give me a pun." Turns it around, and boom, there's a pun. Is it a good pun? No, but it usually happens pretty quickly. So I'm impressed with his turnaround time. I'm scrolling, and I'm realizing now that the scroll position got reset because I'd scrolled to it, because he'd actually sent me this one a while ago. I wasn't sure when I was going to be... Here we go. Aaron sent me a pun. It's a nice, short, and sweet one. I have not read it. Now, if you're a first-time listener, I rank the puns. There have been 19 so far, as there have been 19 episodes of this production so far. This will be the 20th. So let's see where it ranks. Here we go. I heard camera stores are always having a flash sale. I heard camera stores are always having a flash sale. Yeah. That's a pun. It's straightforward. It's flash sales are a thing. It doesn't froth my loins exactly. I'm not tickled by it. It's sort of like it checks the box for sure. Oh boy. I think I'm looking at the list. I would not be able to give this one a leg up over the current 11th ranked one, which is from version 7. My feet really hurt from walking, so I've decided to switch to meters. I think that one's a little bit better. And the one after it is a whole fucking paragraph long, and I'm going to spare you. So here we go. The new 12th ranked pun. I heard camera stores are always having a flash sale. Thank you, Aaron. I look forward to seeing you at Rails World in a couple weeks. Look forward to your talk. Aaron and I always collaborate on our talks. So if you've seen anything you really love in mine, that was from me. Anything you didn't like, that was probably Aaron. Vice versa for his talks. You laughed at any of his jokes. Maybe that was one of mine. You rolled your eyes at one of his jokes. I can't be held responsible for that. All right. So thank you, Aaron, for contributing such a vital part to the program. You're maybe not the hero that we need, but you're the one we deserve. Not the best Apple event I've ever seen. I put every Apple event in my calendar. I block out 1 p.m. Eastern to 3 p.m. Eastern. When I had a treadmill in my house, it was like the day I would run the longest distance. I would just get on the treadmill and I'd just run as long as I could. I'd see if I could outlast Steve Jobs, and I rarely could. Now I sit around like an idiot, watching it like it's a television show. And Apple had their event. I thought it was going to be the day of the debate, because they always do it on Tuesdays, but it was on Monday. Feels like forever ago now, given that the debate turned out to be way more interesting and newsworthy. Yeah, just a perfunctory sort of set of updates, right? Like, not... if it weren't, well, we'll talk about each of the Apple things, I suppose, briefly. You'll never guess, but the 15 Pro and the 15 iPhones are being followed up with by the 16 Pro and the 16. And they look very similar. 16 is about the same size as the 15, very similar body and all that. The back camera surface is now just a vertical traffic light, similar to how it looked on the iPhone 10 and the 10s, which I think is a more aesthetically pleasing one than to the camera mesa in the corner of the other phones since the 11 Pro. The Pro's a little bit bigger, not thicker, but just like a little tiny bit wider and taller with slightly thinner bezel, so slightly bigger screen. The important to me, there is no longer last year, and this happens every now and then, like the 7 Plus versus the 7. The 7 Plus had a portrait mode and a telephoto, and the 7 didn't. When they went to the Max phones, like 10X Max, XS, 10X Max, 10S Max. I'm not going to edit this out. Usually the Max phones had the same functionality as the non-Max Pro phones. This time we are back to them not mattering. It's the only thing you're paying for is an extra $100 for a slightly bigger phone. But last year I went to Max for the first time in a long time because it had a 5x zoom on the telephoto lens. I really enjoyed having the 5x zoom, mostly so I could spy on my neighbors. I just, not to take photos, just to watch. Sorry, I'm creepy enough to want to say that out loud into a microphone, but I'm not creepy enough to buy a proper lens on a real camera. I enjoyed my year with the 15 Pro Max overall. I was surprised by how light it felt, given the titanium frame and them kind of rejiggering where the center of gravity is, and it made it feel lighter. It's still big, right? Like sticks out a little bit from your back pocket. It's sort of uncomfortable, in the front pocket. And the Pro feels small to me now after a year of the Max. I didn't use a case. I didn't use any pop socket technology. It was just me and my hand. And so my thumb is actually, so, the thing about it is you start out and you're like, oh, I could never, ever reach. But like the carnal desire to be able to reach all the corners of your phone is such that here I am a year later, and I'm pretty sure my thumb can just stretch further than it ever could before. So I don't really have a problem with reach anymore. But the idea that it's getting a little heavier and a little bit bigger, and it doesn't have a better camera, I really couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you why I would get the 16 Pro. I looked at it and I thought, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy overall with the 15 Pro Max, but I just couldn't justify getting the 16 Pro Max again. I was like, you know what? I'd rather have it be smaller, lighter, cheaper. Like that's kind of my MO. So 16 Pro it is for me. The only real noteworthy improvements, of course, they're moving from the first generation 3nm process to the second which is way low yield, way super expensive. Didn't actually get them that much in terms of performance gains. And that's why the M3 generation, sort of an aberration of chips, right? The iPads didn't get it. The MacBook Air got it, but the iMac got the M3, but nothing else. Well, of course, the MacBook Pros all did it because they're keeping that to an annual spec bump. But they're trying to get off that first generation 3nm process as fast as possible, which is why, in recent years, the non-Pro phone has just gotten like the sloppy seconds of the silicon from the previous generation of the Pro. This year, that's not the case. They're both getting, and I think this is going to be the branding moving forward. The A18 Pro goes to the Pro phone. The A18 non-Pro goes to the non-Pro phones. And I suspect these are such large volume products that like Apple can afford to have like slightly tweaked silicon each year for both of them. So I think that's where they want to be. It's Saw Mac rumors were saying, oh yeah, it's pretty modest improvements overall on the year over year gains when like the benchmarks are showing both single and multi-core improvements of almost 20%. So it's kind of amazing that Apple nerds now are in this state where like 20% year over year improvements with massive improvements also to battery life on the device are seen as sort of boring. Whereas like AMD just put out their latest generation of processors, and I shit you not, their desktop top performance, all the gamers want it. The 9000 series. They literally are slower than the generation prior for most tasks that most people are doing, especially games. So like it could be a regression, or you could just be Intel and you just be, in a fucking tailspin. So, Apple's sitting pretty right now. Qualcomm has not yet lit the market on fire with their, M3 killer chip that kind of got, Qualcomm had, they hired away a lot of the former PA semi folks who had worked at Apple to make Apple Silicon so great. Qualcomm hires them. They do a great chip. They talk up the chip and how wonderful it is. Microsoft puts it in their Copilot Plus PCs. And then Microsoft proceeds to light their hair on fire in public relations scandal after scandal of all the AI and the privacy implications of those features that they unnecessarily hitched to the ARM processor wagon. And I suspect that between that and also games not working, it's probably not having a huge impact. So here we are. Apple's like got this tremendous incumbency advantage, and we're all bored by the fact that we're getting 20% year over year performance gains. So that's pretty impressive. All the phones now have 8 gigabytes of RAM. That was recently just confirmed this morning or last night, which is good because 8 gigabytes is the absolute bare minimum for running Apple Intelligence, which I have been playing with since about a month ago on my iPad and my 15 Pro. And Apple Intelligence is nice. In fact, it's so nice that, a year from now, 2 years from now, if you're still on basic Siri, it's going to feel a little bit dumb. I wonder too, since Apple and Genmoji, like inventing your own emoji, since that's an Apple Intelligence feature, I feel like it. So, what Apple does now when they want to push a software update is they will bundle new emoji with it. And they'll tell you, hey, you should update your phone, not because of security, not because of updates, not because of new features, but because you'll get new emojis, like the gyoza emoji, the chef's kiss emoji, whatever's coming, right? Because that gets people to install new updates. My understanding is with Genmoji, where you can just say, hey, shrimp with a cowboy hat and have your own Genmoji or emoji that, and when people say, hey, I made an emoji, but it's really just like a GIF or some shit, like that's not what we're talking about. It's not a sticker. These are going to be inline attributed strings that you can just like type as if with the keyboard or do tap back reactions with. And I think to create them, you will need at least a 15 Pro or one of these new 16 phones. And so if you've got a, God forbid, 15 or 14 Pro, and you don't get Apple Intelligence, and like a year has passed and everyone's just making all these Genmojis, right? And sending them around, and all you can do is receive them, I think that's going to be a pretty big motivator for people to get upgraded onto a platform that can support Apple Intelligence. So that makes a lot of sense. The other small bit about the two phones that I think stands out is the charging speed. So they have higher batteries, but I personally would rather have a light phone or a light device with a smaller battery and faster charging. So I'm charging more often, but for less minutes, right? Because if I got to take a break and go plug something in and take a walk, that's always fine with me. And even on a plane, right? There's so few times now where I literally cannot get access to a charger. And even when I do, I could just have a mobile power bank if I really needed it. So like walking around with just like a massive heavy fucking battery makes no sense to me. Similar to why I would be uninterested in buying a gigantic SUV with a massive battery in it. When 99% of my travel was just around the block. Seems wasteful. So the charging speed's faster. So they first you got the 45 watt cable charging. So you got a power delivery USB-C cable, plug that in, 45 watt charging, that's really fucking fast. It wasn't that long ago that like we're talking like 5, 10, 15 watts. I suspect that's going to go 0 to 80 in a hurry, because that's not just 45 watts, but it's also the trickle charging trajectory of Apple's battery chemistry is like, the first 50% charge a lot faster than the last 20%. So that's great, because that means like when you're traveling, you'll be able to plug in, unplug, and yet, fill up for the night with just a little break. The MagSafe story is even more interesting because just last year, Apple open sources effectively the MagSafe protocol as Qi 2, which is, Qi charger plus magnetic puck dingus. Because of course, a lot of Qi chargers now are effectively useless, not because they're old or low power or whatever. It's because they're flat surfaces, and almost everything that you would put on a Qi charger is no longer flat because everything has these huge camera shelves. So that Qi 2, which Apple shares with the world effectively, that it is a magnetic one that has like a locking mechanism, so that, you have, instead of just flat charging pads, you have these protruding, separate standalone pucks. Maybe they're floating in air, or maybe they're on a wire. So Qi 2 is capped at 15 watts, right? And the most Apple thing that you could do is do that, and then in the very next model of your phone, continue to make proprietary extensions that only you and your products will benefit from. So they just did that again. So now they have a new MagSafe puck that, when used in conjunction with the 16, at least the 16 Pro, you'll get 25 watt charging, which is significantly faster. And of course, like, the reason that we can't charge wirelessly as fast as wired is because there's a lot of inefficiency of heat loss as the conductive, cables need to transfer the power. So 25 watt MagSafe is like very fast, and it would be really cool to have. And I immediately start searching because Apple often partners with Belkin or something. Hey, did Belkin make a new stand that I can use at my nightstand or where we keep our phones? No, they did not. The only supported device at this point is just that MagSafe puck charger that's on a wire, which is like fine. But if I'm traveling, I'm probably going to take cables in general, because they're faster and smaller. And if I'm at home, I'd rather have a docking station or a cradle, right, where you can be in standby mode or something like that. So that was the most Apple thing, right? Come out with some new bleeding edge thing at the last minute, work with 0 partners, and not really have thought out how it would be used. And of course, like, it's not. This is a technological. Yes, that's a word. This is a technological innovation that isn't for today, right? It's announced today because it came out this week, but it's really, over the next year or 2 years, they'll release more products with support, and then there will surely be accessories. But it's frustrating as an early adopter to be like, yes, I am buying this phone in part so I can have faster MagSafe charging, but then to know that the only way to get it is to throw out my other 2 MagSafe pucks and get this one, even though I don't really use them. That's a little bit of a bummer, right? But the big thing, the by far the biggest thing on all 4 of these phones, and you can tell that a phone design, like a physical design of the iPhone, is kind of long in the tooth when they start adding features to the non-Pro versions, right? Like, so the visual design of the phone has looked basically the same since the iPhone 12. It's been a few years. People are a little bit bored. The new camera control button, which during the rumor mill phase was being referred to as the capture button, sits exactly where you'd want it to sit if you were holding your phone like a traditional camera and you wanted to have a shutter button for a right-handed, right index finger person. And it's this button sort of like it defied all of the rumors in terms of its capabilities, as well as what it literally is, because it had been referred to throughout as a capacitive button, which made everyone think, oh, it's not a real button. It's just like a faux button with some haptics. And it is that, but it is also a reel button. So it provides multiple levels of force feedback. So when you just press it, camera comes up, and you're meant to press it and not let go. Camera's now up, and you complete the press and you take a picture, right? So similar to an SLR, if you've used a traditional fancy camera, you've got the half push to focus, and then you fully depress to take the photo. That's not how this is going to work out of the box on day one, but it will be a similar sort of thing where you start a press and then you finish you follow through to finish the press, or you start sliding left right with your finger and you can change zoom, or you can swipe a do to change what it changes, like aperture and so forth. But later on this year, they said in a software update, it will do the traditional SLR thing and allow you to do a focus lock on a subject and then move the camera around so that you can have a focused subject that is not in the center of the frame, or that does not require you to, use your finger to tap the screen. And as somebody who very often, when I most want to take a photo, my hands are wet or I'm in a hurry or I'm sweating, being able to take decent photos without having to use the touchscreen will be wonderful. Additionally, being able to reassign the action button to something else, because I'm the kind of person who would love to use the action button on the other side of the phone for anything other than camera, for like a shortcut, for some clever contextual thing, like this time of day I wanted to do this. And I did that at first and I had some fun with it, but at the end of the day, it was like, yes, but what I really want all the time is a button for the camera. And so that's ultimately what I would end up using the action button for. So I think the new camera control is an instant win. Becky when she learned about it, her first reaction was really to wonder whether or not it will successfully influence people to take more landscape-oriented videos and photos, because it will feel so much better than holding your phone vertically, given the hardware button. And I would not be sad if that happened. And neither would Apple, because, of course, spatial video currently requires you, and spatial photos both would require you to take the photo horizontally. And if that was it, that would be a really, really great future edition, right? You're basically taking a device, a very expensive device with a very good camera on it that is used. It's as much camera as it is any other kind of product, right? A network connected camera. And now it finally has a camera button, a shutter button. Could you imagine, right? Like Fujifilm or whatever the fuck, like having a camera product that is like selling like bananas and costs over $1,000, and only on the 16th fucking version they add a button to it. But that's kind of what we're looking at, right? And so it's like easy to look at and be like, oh yeah, it's just another thing. But like, this is the culmination of Apple admitting that like the iPhone is a camera product as much as an anything else product. And I owned the iPhone Edge, and it had, what was legally considered a camera at the time. But the camera on the original iPhone was barely better than the camera on the Game Boy camera. It took such bad pictures. And I've got a whole period of my life from 2008 to 2011 or 2012 where the quality of the photos that Becky and I took went way down, because we were going from decent point and shoot cameras to, let's just snap it with our iPhones and have it look like complete ass. So I think this is momentous and something that should be celebrated. And I think that we're going to have a lot of joy from it. Looking forward to reviews, but I've already pre-ordered and I'm convinced I will like it. And that's not all, folks, because if you are not in the camera app and you long press that capture button, you go into a new, probably not considered an app, a new UI that is not the camera. It is I don't know how to describe it other than it's like Google Lens, where you are now using the camera's information to have a interaction with Apple Intelligence. So, like the example they immediately give is like, you're now vertically holding it. You press and hold the capture button and you're looking at a poster. You take a picture of the poster. It says the date and place of, an event. And then Siri suggests a calendar event based on what's on the poster, right? So you're having a multimodal in AI LLM terms interaction with the assistant. And if you think about how that has to happen for every other app out there, where you take a traditional photo and then you share sheet that photo into the app, or you save it to the camera roll or to files, and then you open that app. And I do this because I have ChatGPT Plus. And so I do this frequently on my devices. That is like so many steps. That's a lot more steps than I would want it to be. Having a dedicated button on the hardware where I could just point it at the fucking, I don't know, let's say I'm confused by a train. Like I'm in Japan, I'm looking at a train schedule, I'm confused. I can just tap it, look at it, and be like, hey, what's this all about? Am I late? Am I gonna what platform should I go to, right? That kind of thing, that you're in a hurry or you're under duress and you want to do something quickly, makes all the difference in the world between whether you use it and you don't use it. And if you have a good experience, you'll use it more. So I'm excited to try that out. I'm on the 18.1 beta. I hope it, I don't know if it's going to be right out the gate when 18.1 drops, which is iOS 18.1, I think is currently on track for October for general release. Right now it's only a developer beta. I hope this one hits right away because it just seems incredibly useful. The other thing, of course, that always accompanies our new iPhones are the new Apple Watches. We're now up to Series 10. Because as a self-professed sucker, I've bought one of every Apple Watch basically, and I am currently wearing, as I record this, I'm wearing an Apple Watch Ultra 2, which was almost indistinguishable from the Apple Watch Ultra 1. It has the little gesture where if you double tap your fingers after raising your wrist, stuff happens or doesn't happen. That feature is less valuable than it sounds because stuff doesn't happen often enough that you stop doing it. And in particular, this whole between that gesture and the Vision Pro being mostly predicated upon tapping your two fingers together, like I don't know if it's just a me thing, but the sensory experience of like, you know, clicking a button and that button is your own flesh is disgusting. It just feels dumb. Like if you tap super duper lightly, then it's like a spider walking across your skin. And if you tap super hard, it's literally painful. And anything in the middle is just sort of like, what's it? When you're like, so like, I like holding hands with my spouse. I like holding hands just fine, but not if like my hands or her hands are clammy. But what I'm finding is my hands are clammy enough most of the time that the sensory pleasure of touching myself in that particular way is not exactly like enjoyable. So I don't use the tappy tap feature because it's stupid. So otherwise, the Ultra 2 was not much of an upgrade. And moreover, I've stopped wearing it all day, every day, because I started to get wrist pain. And this only happened about 18 months into my experience with the Apple Watch Ultra. You know, it's a big boy. It's chunky, it's heavy, it's thick. The screen's nice. It's very bright. Screen's flat, which is a cool look. The crown guard on the Ultra 2 is like just unnecessary. I don't know who it's guarding me from, but it adds like a little bit of sharpness that I wish wasn't there. I accidentally hit the action button all the time and the side button. You know, like if I'm doing push-ups, I'll hit the side button. The action button is every time I'm grabbing the watch to try to get a better view of it, I'll accidentally depress the action button, which will trigger some shortcut, and then 30 seconds will go by because it's too slow. So I think the Ultra and Ultra 2 were the best of the available watches the last 2 years. But now Now let's talk about the Series 10. So they did not update the Ultra 2. So it's Series 10 or Ultra 2 are your choices if you want a watch. You can also get an ancient Apple Watch SE that you shouldn't buy. The Series 10 is bigger, 1 millimeter each, so 46 millimeters and 42 millimeters. Rumors were it's going to be way bigger because there was like a purported 2-inch screen. And they did drastically increase the screen size, but it was by changing the width. So the case height is only 1 millimeter higher, but it's significantly wider, such that now it's got a few pixels more than the Ultra 2. So if the reason you're on an Ultra is because you want the biggest screen possible, well, I got bad news for you. Series 10 is like 16 pixels bigger. The bezels are way tighter, of course. It's way thinner. It's the thinnest Apple Watch ever. Most of that thinness comes from a now metal as opposed to glass backplate. It's, yeah, it's an Apple Watch. It's, big screen. Sure, less battery. It's rated at 18 hours like it always is. I was blown away by one change, which is that it's their lightest one ever. And I'm going 46 millimeters because I do like the large screen strictly because it is possible to type on the keyboard with my little like sausage shaped fingers. The thing that blew my mind is that the cellular, and I tooted this onto my website, which syndicated to some number of other platforms. The version with cellular weighs less than the Wi-Fi version without cellular. So how is it that adding a cellular modem saved them like 8 grams? No, that's not. Was it that many grams? Some number of grams. Grams were saved. I don't have the number in front of me. And somebody replied to me and said, hey, it's probably the case that adding the cellular component actually required them to shrink the battery a wee little bit to make space for it, or for its antenna, or whatever. And as a result, because the battery is a way heavier component, you actually end up with a lighter product. That definitely passes a smell test. Well, interested to see teardowns on it. The other thing that they did with the Series 10 is they got rid of the cursed, stupid, foolish stainless steel versions, which were just like, as somebody who prioritizes weight over everything else, having your watch cost twice as much and weigh twice as much is nonsensical to me. The polished stainless steel, like, I don't think it ever looked that good. It would scuff up immediately. The idea of stainless steel is a nonsense term because it immediately scratches. So it's like, okay, it's not stained. It's just shitty now, is my impression of stainless steel. So those are gone. It's now titanium. So you can either get aluminum for cheap or titanium for less cheap. I think that the Series 10 is going to be a huge hit. I think it's going to sell a lot. I think there's pent up demand for something that is called a new design in the Apple Watch, but boy howdy, if you're looking at one straight on, kind of looks exactly like all the other Apple Watches, going to be honest. So anyway, I'm trading in my Ultra 2 to Apple. I'm getting $365 back for the Ultra 2 that I just bought, which is significantly less. Last year, I got over $500 trade-in credit for the Ultra 1, which I'm starting to think might have been a bug. So I owed like $160 for the 46 millimeter aluminum one. But the thing about the Series 10 by far that I'm most looking forward to is that they're doing a jet black one. And you might recall that the iPhone 7 came in jet black, but that model either sold out really fast or it had a slightly later release date, and I just could not abide that. And of course, I knew it would be finicky and it would also be prone to scratches. So I never got to own the jet black iPhone 7, and I always was envious of it. So here we are, jet black aluminum. Let's go. So I'm excited to. If it weren't for the camera control button, I think that going to a lighter and smaller watch without having to kind of give up many of the other features that I've come to like about the Ultra, that would be the only thing I was looking forward to. But add to that, it's got a sleep apnea thing. Now, supposedly, I think they're still waiting on clearance for the sleep apnea, so it might not be turned on day one. Of course, the blood oxygen sensor is gone if you're buying in the US. And since I'm going to be in Toronto in a couple of weeks, I did have the thought maybe I should just pre-order it for pickup in Toronto just to get the blood oxygen. But then I thought, I don't care. It doesn't matter. The blood oxygen sensor seems to be mostly like a show pony for like peak COVID times when like that was a metric anyone cared about. But for most people, it doesn't seem to have any real bearing on any of the other health measures or markers or fitness stuff that Apple really does. Like, I don't think they ever really incorporated it into the workout results, for example, because it's such a fussy thing to get a reading on. So anyway, like, yeah, I'm giving that up, but that's fine. Yeah. Sleep apnea. It'll be interesting to see if presuming it gets clearance. Apparently, like the Ultra 2 is also getting the sleep apnea tracking. So it seems to be something that is not facilitated by a new sensor, but rather just by the S9 chip and S10 chip's ability to, based on movement alone, judge interruptions to breathing. And it needs 30 days to track, and then it'll start reporting to you whether or not it thinks you might need to get referred out to a sleep doctor. And as somebody who I've had a prescription sitting on my desk for a sleep study for several months now, I'm not going to do that because I'm too lazy and I'm a busy guy. But I will strap on a watch every night. And if it tells me I've got to go call that doctor, then I'll call the doctor. Okay, that's my negotiation with myself. The other thing that happened at the Apple event was the AirPods. They claimed that they're updating the entire line. They got big news about the entire line of AirPods, which was an immediate surprise because I expected them to update everything except for the AirPods Pro 2. Out are the AirPods 2. Out are the AirPods 3. I think, story is that the AirPods 3 sold very poorly, and I suspect it is because people either want to buy the cheapest AirPods or the best AirPods, and very few people are in the market for, I want some middle-of-the-road earbuds, please. I don't want to feel... I want to feel like just affluent enough to buy medium-priced luxury headphones. So yeah, the AirPods 3 didn't sell. So instead we get two variations of the AirPods 4. The AirPods 4 are the one that everyone will buy who are just looking for the cheapest thing. And then the AirPods 4 with noise canceling are, they take the microphone and computational noise canceling, adaptive mode, conversation awareness, all the stuff that the AirPods Pro second generation has been used to for a while. And put it into normal shaped AirPods that don't have the physical latex seal. And I think for a lot of people, that'll be more comfortable who don't want the seal. But of course, it stands to reason that you're not going to get nearly as good noise canceling if you don't have a seal there. So I'm kind of curious to hear how reviews of that shake out. I suspect that Apple will see a much more even distribution of sales across all three of those models, right? Because for the people who want the best, the Pro second generation are still better, even though they're not as new. They're 2 years old. But if you just want noise canceling and you don't really care about the seal at this point, like AirPods 4 with noise canceling, or what I think they put it like 179, 180, and that in that ballpark, like it's a pretty compelling price, I think, for the quality. Again, it all comes down to how good the noise canceling really is in practice. I think it also supports voice isolation for the microphone mode, which is a really, really big difference in quality for that shitty ass, terrible microphone that they put on the AirPods. The other update was the AirPods Max, right? So the AirPods Max doesn't get a proper update, really. I think the only thing it adds is personalized spatial audio. None of those other advanced features. Still probably comes in that little, silicone. Oh God, silicone. I never can get the material straight. Everyone always fucks this up, and I always make fun of it. And now here I am because I'm recording a podcast and I'm in write only mode, so my brain is turned off. Silas something bra that the AirPods Max ships in. I'm sure it still comes in that. It's like, these are the AirPods Max from 4 years ago. Apple all but said on stage, we have learned nothing. Don't expect that. All we're doing is changing it from Lightning to USB-C because we're getting off Lightning. And we apparently did some sort of component bump such that the personalized spatial audio will work now. So if you're an AirPods Max guy or gal, I bet you AirPods Max, because you see people use them. There's a fella in my neighborhood who does road biking, like serious road biking. Like it looks like he's like really getting a workout in as he does 5,000 fucking laps around my 3 kilometer neighborhood loop. Wearing AirPods Max. So people wear them, but I got a feeling they've done phenomenal business for chiropractors. Because the weight distribution on those things is just all fucking wrong. I can't imagine having mine on for more than an hour without getting neck pain. And that is why I'm looking at them now. They're blue. They're in their little bra. They're permanently plugged in. And even though they're plugged in, I guarantee you that the battery is dead because that's how it works. You got to unplug it and then replug it in. And then it's like a spark plug. It's one of the fucking stupidest products that Apple ever made for sure. But, you know, in spite of itself, it sells well. And it costs $550. So it's like if you're trying to decide between buying a share of Apple stock and just donating to various countries' sovereign wealth funds, yeah, you could do worse than just buying an AirPods Max and giving Warren Buffett another $100 in profit. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, goodness, no. But the worst part, ooh. Whenever the keynote goes to health doctor lady, now I'm not saying this because she's usually just talking about women's health stuff, because like of course they had cycle tracking and other things that are more specifically geared towards women. In general, I'm disinterested with Apple's health tracking stuff, sleep apnea aside. Even then, it's more that like the flow of the presentations is here's new shit. Here's new shit. Look at this new shit. Ain't this shiny? Look at this spec or this feature. Her segments are always wellness inflected. And it feels preachier, like, hey, it is so important to make sure that you X, Y, Z, and we believe in yada, yada bullshit stuff. And so whenever Dr. Lady is on in one of these keynotes, it is an immediate prompt for the audience to go check their phones because they know nothing really noteworthy is going to happen. And, you know, hey, if you feel different, like I don't know how else they do it. I get it. But the thing about this time, why this was the worst Dr. Lady cutaway that they've ever done, was because they set it up as, hey, we've got big news for the AirPods Pro, for fans of the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. And like, because they just previously said they're updating the entire lines of AirPods. And as anyone who is a hardcore Apple fan who's actually taking time out of his goddamn Monday afternoon to watch a keynote live, they are, if they own a single pair of AirPods, I am pretty sure it's probably the AirPods Pro 2nd generation. You say you're updating the whole line. You say you got good news for it. And then health lady. And you're like, huh, health lady. And then she goes on some ramble about whatever, you know, what was it? I think it was limiting volume and hearing loss and stuff like that, right? Like how it already helps prevent hearing loss. And then gets into this, what seems to me to be a complete sidebar about the clinical approval provisional from the FDA, because like that's been something that the Biden administration has been working on, is allowing over-the-counter hearing aids to be sold in a recent executive order. Like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And so like, but then I realized that was it. That like what they're doing is they're doing the hearing aid mode for the existing AirPods Pro 2nd generation, and that there is not new hardware. And that was the biggest rug pull I've ever experienced watching an Apple keynote. Like I don't know how they should have done that announcement. I would agree, like on the merits, if they had just said, look, we don't have new AirPods Pro 2nd generation. We don't have a 3rd generation for you yet. Sorry, Charlie. But we do have this badass motherfucking, like, we're going to change motherfucking lives with this shit. You know, you're going to have relatives who you can communicate with more fluently. You're going to go to a bar and it's going to be busy, and we're going to be able to help you with your auditory processing issues or whatever the hell. Like, we're going to save you so much money on shitty, low quality prescription hearing aids that don't work that well and make it even better. And when you have it in, like, we're also going to use that same hearing profile and make your TV sound better, your music sound better. Everything that you're using inside of your apps and coming out of your devices is also going to sound better because it's going to be attenuated to whatever your hearing disability is. They could have said that and it would have been an awesome fucking blowaway message. Blowaway, to use an Apple adjective. But instead, they set it up like they're going to announce new hardware, and then all we got is that. And now I'm like, not to say I'm anti-hearing aid, but man, I felt really like, I don't know. I care a lot about the presentations because as somebody who has an interest in like what makes a good presentation, that was one of the downright stupidest structural own goals that I've ever seen them do in the modern era of the post-COVID. We're just cutting video stuff. So yeah, there you go. So if you need a hearing aid, like I'm going to totally try turning this on. My hearing is not fantastic. I feel bad for the people with great hearing because you got to listen to me in full fidelity. I get to listen to myself as a sort of, a muddled mess. What's next? So anyway, all in all, here we are again. I'm normally not the one to say, hey, Apple's not innovating. And, I genuinely get excited about every new Apple thing. I bought the 16 Pro in white because it'll get hot less fast here in Florida. I bought the Series 10 46 millimeter in aluminum. I bought nothing else. I will eagerly await their arrival next Friday, and I will open them up, and I will do the transfers, and then I will probably have acclimated to both of them within a couple days without thinking about it. I don't know what else there is to... Okay, so the only other thing that I haven't already mentioned that I will probably even try is the 48 megapixel wide angle, ultra wide camera. Because right now, if you're zooming at if you go from 1x to 2x, right? Like that's a sort of lossless because it's taking the 48 megapixel 1x camera, cropping it down to just the 12 megapixels in the middle at 2x. If you got the 5x after that, then you're actually taking the 5x image and shrinking it down. So it's pretty lossy, especially at the low end of that. But right now, if you start at 1x and you go to 0.9, what you're really getting is you're going from a 48 megapixel gigantic frame that would crop really well. You're going, just because it can only get that aspect ratio, whatever it is, 24 millimeters. So to go to 0.9, now you're using the ultra wide camera, but you're digitally zooming it up to get to that, because it's a 12 megapixel sensor. And so right now, like, I think a lot of people, I see more and more people using the zoom wheel kind of indiscriminately without thinking. Of course, they're not thinking about which lens it is, but the number of people I see taking ultra wide photos and they're in dark environments or whatever, and it just doesn't look very good. I'm very glad to see that they will have a 48 megapixel ultra wide. I think the macro photos will look better. Yeah, it's just time for that. Gosh, that's it though. All right, moving right along. What else we got going on these days? Over in the world of video games, since the last podcast, Sony launched their big live service game of the year. There's fanfare. Everyone's excited. It's a big launch. The name of the game is Concord. You'll never believe it. It's a hero shooter, kind of like Overwatch. And what's this? This just in. Sony has shut down Concord due to lack of interest. So, since version 19 of this podcast, this game that was Sony's big marquee release of the late summer, shipped, released. A few days after that was announced it's unreleasing it to go offline, and now I believe it's already offline. Yeah, things been offline for a week now. Everyone, we talked about this, wants to build these live service games because it's like, oh, you can just build one game with fewer assets than a AAA, single player game. So way less development time and cost. And you could just run it forever and have a bunch of schmucking idiots just buy skins and costumes every season. Like, they see that Fortnite money and they're like, let's just do more things like that. And they don't understand that in the attention economy, that's like saying like, man, I see a lot of people on Facebook. Let's go make another Facebook, right? You remember that few years where like apps like Peach and stuff, like we're going to be a different social network, like a different feed and like this group of friends. None of those take off because none of them get network effect. And the brand loyalty around social media is even less sticky than games because games also, they engender a sort of loyalty because to a certain extent, like any social media platform is like, this is just video through this feed, or this is just text through this feed. And you'd swap out, like in this case, threads for Twitter or whatever. Like if the people move with it, then it's functionally identical. It's the same thing. In fact, sometimes I'll see screenshots from threads and forget that it's not literally Twitter. But you're never going to mistake Fortnite and Roblox and Apex Legends and Valorant. Like, these are all very different games. They feel different. They play differently. They have different rules. So like the loyalty and the network effect and the familiarity means that like the cost to a person who is one of the people who plays one of these games and does so enough that they actually pay for skins. So like economically, right? You need a certain number of players to play for everything depends on how many people play. Now, this was a paid game, which means that you're starting with like a low number, right? Because any sort of, if it was free to play, you'd have a certain number of people just try it. So you have a low number of people who buy it. And then you have multiple filtering gates where it's like the low number of people who buy it, they boot it up, and then they go and check the lobbies. And in order to keep the game running, you need people in the lobbies matchmaking. And you need enough of them that the matchmaking can happen really quickly, because if you're sitting for more than a minute or two, people will be bored and they will quit. They're not already loyal to this game. It's not a viral sensation. So if they're sitting there in the lobby and it's like, oh yeah, the matchmaking is going to take 15 minutes while we wait for that many people to log on. Additionally, there in this game in particular, and this happens a lot, there are like 3 or 4 different playlists or feeders for matchmaking. So it's like not enough. And these are, I think, 10, 15 people matches. So like they need to have at any given time in any given region. Of course, like there's also like there's regionalization because there's certain like quality of service is necessary for, you don't want people too far away because then the pings are too slow. All that to say, like these lobbies were basically empty on day 1, day 2, day 3 because they were never saturated with enough players. Now, some people said, oh, well, if they just made it free to play, then it would have been successful. But to be honest, that's just the first filtering mechanism for a game like this. The second one is we need so many players that it becomes a cultural moment so that some number of those players will want to buy what was it in Call of Duty last year? The Cheech and Chong skins, or the Optimus Prime skin, or like this takedown or whatever, because the reason that the skins have cultural cachet, you're only going to sell to like 2% of the people who play the game. 98% just play and they move on. But the reason that the skins have value to that 2% who do operate as whales and buy a bunch of stuff is because they see it as, this has cultural significance and I am basically buying status, right? Or maybe I buy the battle pass and I earn my way up to the battle pass and earn all of these unlocks by having worked through the paid battle pass. And now I am signifying my status as maybe a longtime player because this is from season 1 or whatever, and you can't get it anymore, or as a skilled player because this is from having gotten to level 45 in this battle pass or whatever, and just seeing that I'm the Mr. Potato Head skin is an indirect signal to anyone in the know in this sort of cultural cachet of this little microcosm of a game that like, oh, look at that Mr. Potato Head, he's a real fucking badass over there, and don't mess with him. right? That is what drives the live service game economy. But if you're a bean counter at a game studio or game publisher, I should say, and you just see that like the profit margins on something like Fortnite, now that it has achieved the network effect and it could just turn the crank and each season costs them about $15, right? Like there are expenses in running a live service game, which is why like if it's not a huge success on day one, you kind of have to shut it down. It is, if the flywheel doesn't immediately start turning, you'll see games like this one where this studio, I think it's their first game that they released. I think it started as an offshoot of something Monsters, a spinoff of like a longtime Bungie developer. People had thrown around like it was 8 years or 6 years, however long it was, however expensive it was. Sony invested a certain amount into the marketing. I think they knew that they after the beta they had a turd on their hands and they didn't really push super hard or have a demo at GDC or anything. I think they knew that this was going to be how it played out. It's the bloom is coming off the rose on live service games, and it seems like every publisher needs to have 2 or 3 real fucking terrible tragic failures to get the lesson, right? Where you have Rocksteady in the Warner Brothers world comes out with a trilogy of Batman games that are single player experiences that are all very well received. Third one kind of trailed off a little bit, but then Warner Brothers is like, okay, so Suicide Squad now is going to be a live service like game. And so they invest all of this money and all this time into these multiplayer components that then no one ever uses because there's never enough people playing it because it wasn't very good, because it distracted from the core of what it was. Or I think it was Crystal Dynamics, when owned by Square. I think they were the ones who were making the Avengers game for Marvel, which is a similar sort of thing. People booted up and they're like, hey, that Hulk doesn't look like, not my Hulk. These characters just look like cheap imitation people because they didn't get the rights to the actors from the original Marvel movies. And also it's like, how many story missions can you do? Like 20? Okay, well, I did that and now I'm done. Move on. So Square learned their lesson. I think it was Square. Whoever it was. EA had Anthem and that just bombed miserably, where they're like trying so hard to not be Destiny 2 that they ended up making all those same mistakes. So Sony has since purchased Bungie and then realized that even Destiny 2 was like already on its way out in terms of its profitability and had to lay off a bunch of people over there. I think Sony is going to have a really hard time diversifying from big narrative story games, which are big bang, increasingly unsustainably expensive to produce. Yeah, people talk about Microsoft being in a bigger pickle right now from a gaming world perspective, but Sony is right behind them. And in fact, I think that Microsoft, with the subscription sales and with the independent developer relations, like they've got a bigger moat. Like I think that they could actually weather the storm a lot better than Sony could right now. PSVR 2's launch was a disaster. They're still trying to sell off inventory. They just announced the PS5 Pro. So if you're not familiar, like typically it used to be that like console hardware generations were about every 5 years. And then they got slower and slower because like we hit a point of diminishing returns where, you go from a Nintendo 64, which launched in fall of 1996, to the GameCube, which launched in the fall of 2001. Like that's a 5-year period. And you look at the graphical fidelity difference of like what's achievable on those two platforms, and it's night and fucking day. And then you go from, say, the Xbox 360 to the Xbox One, and like it's like literally a regression in a number of ways. It's just not a big jump. In the Xbox One and PS4 generation, because changing a console generation will force you to hit reset because it breaks compatibility, forces you to hit reset on your install base. It's not something you should do lightly. And so the console makers would much rather have compatibility of all their games so that when they keep making new games, they're exciting the enthusiast audience, but they're not necessarily turning away everybody else. And in that PS4, Xbox One generation, the PS4 Pro came out and the Xbox One X came out. And those were spec enhanced, faster versions of that same generation, played all the same games, but developers could opt in and twiddle bits to make the games perform better. In that generation in particular, there was a natural marketing angle for those hardware releases that, it had been 4 years, 5 years, whatever. So people were ready to spend some money, Both those consoles were starting to look a little long in the tooth, especially if you'd bought a 4K TV, because they all pretty much crapped out at 1080p, and some had to upscale from something lower to get to that. So these mid generation refresh consoles, the story was easy. It was like, this is your 4K edition, right? Well, that was a natural sales pitch. PS5, the Xbox One X come out. They're already 4K consoles. In fact, they've been out since 2020, but they were so supply constrained, and then we had just the chaos of the pandemic and everything, so they never really got the game libraries. They never really had hit their stride. And now here we are, what feels like a lot of people saying, quote unquote, already 4 years later, talking about a refreshed a PS5 Pro. And the attach rate on the PS5 has been, we don't have good data on video game sales, but the attach rate on the PS5 has been like low. I have bought maybe 2 games, maybe 1 since it launched. I've really not gotten my money's worth out of it at all. I barely ever use it. I switched almost entirely to PC gaming because on day one, my PC had way better graphical capabilities than the PS5, and the PS5 exclusive haven't been that compelling. So, and on top of it, Sony's increasingly being forced, due to that fact, to release more games on PC. So why would I buy a PS6? So the PS5 Pro, it could have hooked somebody like me if the story had been, hey, the graphics are off the charts awesome now. Like this is handling all these problems or whatever, and it's got the convenience and so forth. But they can't really do that because there's not a natural story to tell. First of all, it's not that big of an improvement. Second, they can't afford, because I think that they're looking ahead strategically to like a lot of these intractable issues of unsustainable costs in game production. They can't sell this thing at a loss because the attach rate is so low that they're going to, which attach rate is just a industry jargon for number of games sold per console, that they wouldn't necessarily make it up in volume if they sold a lot of them. So they're not selling it at a loss. So now they're charging $699, which is the most expensive console release ever. For, they can brag it's 46% stronger GPU, but like how that actually manifests is, like marginally better performance, a few more frames, or you can play the fidelity mode at 60 frames a second instead of having to play at 30 frames a second. Like this is not nothing, but it's like they put out a really short video demoing it. It didn't really show anything visually. It's like boxes inside of boxes of tiny little things, and like, oh yeah, it's a little bit more dithered or jaggy or whatever. But this is not a compelling product release. I don't think it's going to sell particularly well. Mark Cerny, who's like always their hardware pitch man for the last several generations, he was not putting his back into it because to make the claim that this is way, way better, you're shitting on the main PS5 product, which you still got to sell a lot of. Whereas before you could just say, hey, this is, this new one's the PS4 Pro is for the 4K people, right? And we still got the regular PS4 for everyone else. It's here is like to sell a PS5 Pro. Well, you'd have to basically say the PS5 itself is a compromised product, and it is. And in reality, even if you made that sale, I'm not sure it could deliver. So probably the biggest feature, though, for anyone who is in that ecosystem, who's looking at it, is the, what is it? PSSR, the PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. And that's a upscaler. So it'll use some AI bits similar to DLSS to upscale content up to 4K. And do it in an intelligent way that's like, looks at the pixels and tries to guess what the pixels around it would be. And sometimes like, the computer makes mistakes, but sometimes it's like, whoa, this is really, and we've looked at other, you may have seen other examples of upscaled photographs, like take an old picture and pass it through some AI magic. And it's like, oh, wow, it's like HD great grandma. or whatever. So anyway, that's disappointing. Let's see what else we got to talk about today. I switched back to coffee, and that was a bad choice. I'm choking on the coffee now, but I don't want to cough into the mic. That mistake that I just made was less bad than a Florida surgeon who mistakenly removed his patient's liver instead of their spleen through a laparoscopy procedure. The word scopy was in there. I don't know how you fit a liver through a scope, but he severed like a blood vessel to the liver and the patient bled out. Yeah, if you're getting your spleen removed, I would recommend you ask your doctor to please not accidentally disconnect your liver and then let you die while you're confused as to why they're bleeding so much. That would be pretty bad. That's a pretty bad one. That's that happened in my home state of Florida. It's true. I don't know what else I have to say about that other than it came up on the news and I said, this makes me feel better about how good I am at my job, because whatever the software equivalent is of mistaking a spleen for a liver, I don't feel like I've done anything that stupid lately. So sorry, Mr. Doctor, but you burnt. Also on the Florida Express, there is there's an Agatha Christie novel hiding in here somewhere, but we have this new train called the Bright Line. And it is a private company that was mostly funded by, or heavily funded in a public partnership to get don't call it high speed, medium speed rail from Miami to Orlando. And then it'll eventually move on to Tampa. And it's open now, and the station's at Orlando Airport. And so a lot of my friends have taken it. And one of them was on it last week. And I know 7 people now. I've talked to 7 people who've taken the Bright Line. It takes about 4 hours to get to Miami from Orlando, which is incidentally about how long it takes to drive to Miami from Orlando. The benefit, though, is that you don't have to drive with fucking Miami people, because the closer you get to Miami, the more people drive like it's fucking Vice City, the Grand Theft Auto title. And I find that to be stressful and not particularly relaxing. So, I could see the benefit of like, oh yeah, let's just get a relatively affordable, even first class, relatively affordable train ticket and just enjoy the train. Problem is, of those 7 people, I've now talked to 3 of them whose journey was interrupted by murder. Somebody died. Not on the train, but, an announcement comes on and they say, hey, everyone, we are momentarily interrupted. Service has been interrupted. Please lower the shades in your window while we scrape a human off of the rail. And one of the people who I talked to, I run into him just the day after he got back from this trip. He said, yeah, it was supposed to be a 4-hour trip. I was on the fucking train for 7 hours because they hit a couple kids on the tracks. Now, Brightline is saying in almost every case, these are people trespassing you're trying to drive past the railway crossing signs, like they're down and they're driving around it, That's almost always it. But like they've been like in their public communications, like a little aggressive and talking about it as like junkies and stuff and drug addicts like hopping over fences. And they're colorful enough in the language that I almost makes me suspicious. Like that there's something else going on here. I saw one comment on Reddit that said like, where they live, there's a crossing and like sometimes the crossing lights don't go off and then the train just zooms by, which, given the number of deaths, and I'll link to one of the stories from May, probably worth double checking that all those lights and railway bars are working. So yeah, it just happened again to yet another friend who was trying to make a trip to Miami, and was told to close the shades and wait a couple hours, and coroner comes and all that jazz. And of course, they don't acknowledge like what the fuck happened on the PA system, so it just leads to people speculating and getting increasingly agitated. But it happens so often now that like you think that they should have some sort of protocol, like, all right, free champagne, something to keep them entertained. I don't know. Hey, round of snacks. New in-flight movie. I know that's a glib way to discuss it, but this is really weird. Like, if you drill into this, you realize that the number of train-related deaths in America is like a lot. Like, of course, it's safer than driving. And technically, I suppose, most of the deaths are people in cars dying, so it attributes to a traffic death. So yes, they're safer than cars, but if they're hitting cars, then where are we? So I don't mean to be overly glib about it, but like, it's just so many people have been hyping this particular train route as being like the solution. Then you find out it's actually not high-speed rail, and that it's, you know, you got to go to the airport. The original station was going to be like 2 miles from my house, which would have been awesome at Disney Springs. But then that got kiboshed, you know, because people near the convention center and Universal, they were like, hey, that's going to steal a lot of traffic from us, fair or whatever. But there's just been a lot of hype around it. And, you know, I had another friend talking to me. He's going to go to a Taylor Swift show in Miami with his family. He's like, oh yeah, I'll just buy, there's always a bunch of tickets. I'll buy some Brightline tickets. And I was like, make sure that you get like a lot of buffer time, bud. There may be a manslaughter on the way that you gotta account for that. So just maybe the reason that this sticks out in my head is that my view of train travel is all predicated in Japan, where like I've been held up by literal hurricanes. I sat on I had water actually like come up into a cabin once on a Shinkansen while going to Hiroshima for Ruby Kaigi. But like, you know, that's 2 or 3 bad hours out of, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I think of train travel as like, yes, hyper punctual, always on time, super duper reliable. The whole value is that, the reliability. It leaves when it is supposed to leave, and it gets there when it's supposed to get there. And I realize now, as I even say that, like, that's not really true in Europe. That's not true in most of the world, but it's very true in Japan. And so I think when everyone started hyping the Brightline as like the next best thing since sliced bread here in Florida, I was like expecting it to be like that level of service. And it is not. So it's not as nice. It's not as fast. It's not as reliable. It's not as timely. And also some people die. More people die than, you know, in Japan, train-related suicide deaths, where people jump over, you know, railings and overpasses, still happens a lot less now. They changed a lot of regulations such that the family now has to pay some responsibility, which is enough of a shame inducer that it happens less now. But boy, I will not be taking the train the next time I go to Miami. And also, other than going to Joe's Stone Crab, I don't know that I ever want to go back to Miami. I don't think it's my speed. Another news item, OpenAI introduced, I think this is the thing that would have been called Strawberry. This is like a lot of people resigned over this thing. OpenAI's O1 preview. O1 is, I don't know what the O stands for. Like, oh my God, this is pretty good. It's not GPT-4 or 4o. It's a new model that is available to GPT Plus subscribers. You only get like 30 messages a month or some very minuscule amount, but it's not just trying to complete tokens as fast as possible, which is what GPT optimizes for. It instead has many, many layers of, call it critical thinking and analysis, and safety alignment steps, such that like it's in the press release, the Mathematics Olympiad, GPT-4o can only solve 13% of them through really hard math problems, and this model scored an 83%. So like they're pitching it as a reasoning model. And I played with it a little bit last night, and it was pretty impressive. I gave it a really thorny geopolitical problem, and I said, hey, here's the different actors, and here's a hypothetical conflict. Like, what would happen, and how would it play out? And it gave me as good of a short response essay as you could expect from listening to like a foreign policy podcast from somebody who's like, that's their thing. I'm very interested to see where this leads. I'm personally, apart from the fact of just like AI shit getting better all the time, which is all, it's interesting to watch. There's been in recent months, I think, a sense that we've reached the point of diminishing returns on just LLMs as we know them, where like they can only really get so good at creating fluent bullshit for us. Like they're not going to come up with new creative ideas out of nothing, synthesizing stuff from their training data or whatever. But seeing approaches that layer on way longer pipelines and self-auditing processes and loops sort of before they just start the immediate verbal diarrhea of splatting out words for you with no way to go in backspace. This is, yeah, I don't know. I find it interesting. So if you've got GPT Plus, go play with it. If you have a clever question, if you don't have access and you have a clever question that you would like to see how O1 Preview answers it, write your query at podcast@searls.co, and I will do it live on air, and we'll see how it goes. One last thing from the news. I've never been a fan of listening to people, but common knowledge in social sciences and politics and all over the world has been like the best way to persuade somebody is to listen to them, listen to their problems, understand them, where they're at, how they think, and empathize. And then say, no, ignore all that. Actually, you should believe this about abortion or whatever. And that always struck me as horseshit. One, because like, yes, I like being listened to, but personally, if somebody is listening to me and they're asking me about what I believe, I will, every time I explain anything, I'm creating a story in real time. And so I'll create a new version of the story that is like reinforcing the thing that I already believe. And then they'll say, okay, so I think it should be this. And I'll be like, okay, cool. So now I have started with where I'm at and you've stated where you're at. And so now I am naturally in a place of conflict. And because my memory, because we're disagreeing, and because my memory of my own side is like, I believed in that argument as recently as right fucking now. Now your persuasion of me is going to require you to overcome the pride of authorship that I feel for that story that you just had me create by asking me what I fucking thought. Well, it turns out that big listening has finally been proven wrong, and there's a research paper to prove it. And now, like, if you're a social science person, you're probably inclined to think that like kumbaya and all that and empathy and listening, and these are like all virtuous, and so therefore like more likely to be successful. But what the study shows, this is so predictable, is that they were talking about immigration policy, and these are Zoom calls as opposed to like door knocking or something. Listening to people didn't work, but it didn't persuade people, but it did make them like the persuader better. So like I would not be persuaded, but I would like them more. And the reason that I liked them more is I assume, probably gave me an opportunity to talk, and everyone likes talking and telling people what they think. And so like, yeah, like I had a good time, and they seemed nice and they listened to me. Right. So they don't mistake people liking you more for actually having influenced them, because the flip side was the people who just went in, made the persuasive argument, usually I think in this case by telling a story, a compelling story, you get thrown off guard because you haven't been thinking, oh yeah, like I have all these entrenched negative thoughts about immigration, right? Instead, you're hearing this compelling story and you're like, oh yeah, like, and then only after you have felt, that kernel of movement in your cold, dead heart, only after that do you realize, oh, wait, this actually contradicts my priors. And then it's up to you. And so the argument is no longer me versus them. It's current me and what I'm feeling versus past me. So again, this is another case of paper comes out, validates everything Justin's ever thought about anything. And because of that confirmation bias, I'm sharing it with you. And I think it's actually worth looking through and thinking about, because we are entering a moment where, you know, between the election and just sort of like how polarized the world is, if all of us got a little bit better at persuading other people of what we believed in, at least on like a case by case basis, we'd probably be existing in a lot less like localized conflict. Of course, you know, getting everyone to agree with you can have just as many detrimental effects. So as you read this, remember that with great power comes great responsibility. That is all. And that, my friends, is the news. Recommendations. I've been watching a lot of YouTubes. Nothing here that's probably from a channel or would be especially interesting to y'all. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of, so I watch a couple channels like Wall Street Millennial and How Money Works. They're mediocre. I think Economics Explained is probably much better, but a little bit more boring. And I found that a lot of the finance related YouTube channels are advertising Oracle NetSuite, which, if you're not familiar, is an ERP. And if you don't know what ERP stands for, you're not the target market. So like, this is an enterprise product for massive fucking companies, and they're selling it on YouTube channels made by independent creators who probably work solo and maybe have 2 or 3 people. And so the best product placement ads are like direct to consumer stuff where, oh yeah, here's a Factor, you just microwave these goddamn meals, or here's Squarespace, you make a website. And like, they have individual experience, if not with that product, then with similar products. So it's just really funny that I've watched probably 5 people trip over themselves trying to explain what the fucking ERP is. And it's like, well, at our current scale of just me and, my cats, I don't actually need a rigorous expense tracking system that is going to cover my tax liabilities in 175 countries. But when I do, and I expect I'll get there soon, this will also handle all of my, SAML needs for my single sign-on across all of the different subsidiaries in my broader organization here at the, the Ron Howard directed movies review fan site. I wonder how much any of these promoted content things like really move the needle for the advertisers. I know the advertising market's gotten a little bit tight since the downturn, but who at Oracle had this idea, and will they get a single qualified lead out of it is a great fucking question that I'm somewhat sure they don't have a way to answer. So anyway, this section is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace, you can make a website, but it's going to look pretty shitty. Yeah. I'm working on a Squarespace right now, actually, and it's a real pain in the dick. They redid, so they had all these many generations of Squarespace from like standard templates, and you'd make a site and it would be kind of married to that template, sort of like a fork. And so everything was versioned, and then they went from like, I think it was 7 to 7.1. And completely in that process rewrote the whole fucking book. And so instead of templates now per se, there are, they call it the fluid engine. And it's like, basically it's like you have a very small number of primitive building blocks with which to build a site. And you start with the desktop view, and then you click to the mobile view, and you have to kind of rejigger everything so that it looks decent in a mobile viewport. But boy, I am like, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of YouTubes and people talking about how Squarespace is such an easy fucking way to make a website. And maybe it's just this new fluid engine is like bad, But like, to make something that does not look like a bucket of assholes takes a lot of technical knowledge of how the website really works under the hood. Not to say that I've gone in and written a ton of custom CSS for this thing already, but I have had to write a little bit. The limitations and the bugginess. Oh my God, the bugs. I cannot believe that they shipped this. Like, the number of times where you'll be in an edit session, and if you didn't click save, you are now just in a completely undefined state. And you go and open up a new tab and it's gone, of course, and you refresh the page and it's broken. You you click edit and then you'll see like nothing, no content. All the content is just gone. Squarespace seems like just a huge piece of shit. So anyway, we're getting Becky's stuff on Squarespace because unfortunately there seems to be nothing better. And now feel free to write in and tell me what's so much better. But it's for us just going to be a landing page and blogging engine and podcast thing. And that it be completely self-manageable by Becky without needing my direct intervention is like critical. So that's where we're at. My hope is, and I genuinely believe this, my hope is that once set up, once the landing page looks right and the blog is set up to work, it will all be fine. And it will work fine. And it's only when we go in and we need to change some like layout stuff that it's going to be a pain. But boy, from a first impressions perspective, like the amount of just WTFing that I had to do to get from doesn't work to kind of works to still looks like ass was way longer than it should have been. I get that it's a hard problem. The web is big and complex, and when you want things to be responsive, like how do you build a WYSIWYG editor inside of the thing? I get it. But yeah, for being like the big incumbent, and of course, like a private equity firm bought them, and who knows what the future holds for Squarespace and what their exit strategy looks like. But I don't necessarily recommend Squarespace, and they are not a sponsor, which is why you're hearing some honest fucking advice about Squarespace for once. Something I would recommend. It's a little video game called Star Wars Outlaws by Massive Entertainment, published by Ubisoft. I told you I was looking forward to this one. This is a video game-assed video game. It is rare. Almost every AAA game for the last 7-8 years that's a single player experience has sort of has borrowed a lot of stuff from role-playing games where you're leveling up and you get extra, XP when you kill shit, and then you get stronger and stronger and stronger. This one has a variety of game loops that are each separately engaging. That, you know, there are challenges, there's different activities. It feels way more like a really good live service game, to be honest. Like, it reminds me of Destiny 2 in the sense that, like, I could fire it up and then think of like, here's 3 or 4 different ways to play today, and all of them are independently fun, and they're all inherently challenging, and I'm not incredibly overpowered the longer that I play. And it's, as a result, I am finding myself enjoying aspects of gameplay that I typically avoid. Like, I typically avoid games where there's a strong failure state, or where I could spend 20 minutes, you know, working on something, die, and then lose all 20 minutes of that effort, right? And have to do it all again. But here I'm both enjoying the game itself. It's not that the movement is so fun or the shooting feels so fantastic. Because that can buy you some amount of patience. It's, for me, largely, I think, the setting is what's selling it. So, like, the graphics are phenomenal. The Star Wars setting is so thoroughly, like, successfully conveyed in the artwork. You look up a panel of buttons and you're like, that is a fucking Star Wars ass panel of buttons. Did I say Star Trek earlier? Star Wars. Where am I? It is an extremely Imperial cruiser that I'm on right now. And it sells the scenery just so well. There's a lot of fog, by the way, in space. Get used to that. There's a lot of fog everywhere. So the volumetric fog effects are pretty cool. I'm playing on a 3090 on my PC, so I don't know how this looks on consoles, but it feels good. There's 3, 4, 5 criminal syndicate factions, and you play off of each other. So like one of the things that's really enjoyable about the game is like, whereas in a lot of games doing side quests are just sort of a infinite scroll of side stories that you can do, and like, you get some XP or you get some rewards or some loot or whatever when you do them. In this game, pretty much every side quest will help you with your reputation with one crime family and hurt you with another one. So you want to be strategic. Like, it makes sense at certain points in the main game narrative to be friendlier with, say, Crimson Dawn, one of the crime families, because there are main quest gameplay story missions that will have you going through their territory, or the Ashiga clan, same thing. And so while I'm doing those main missions, I'm like, well, I may as well go and grind out some side quests for this faction so that I have good enough status so that I can walk freely through their area, so I don't have to be like doing some stealth encounter to get to get into the place where I could start the mission. It's here's a Pike side quest and it's right here and I could do it right now and it even sounds interesting, but I know that I would improve my standing with the Pike Syndicate, but then Crimson Dawn would go down and so on and so forth. And then there's various rewards that you unlock for reaching certain milestones of the faction relationship. It's just like it's a level of complexity is the wrong word. I think a respect for the intelligence of the player, because this stuff is mostly self-explanatory. It's mostly, it's not heavily tutorialized throughout the game. And while there's a million lore menus, and of course, like marking them all as red is a fucking task and a half for no good reason. Like, instead of just putting a big waypoint in front of you and saying, hey, dummy, run in this line, follow the yellow arrow for the next 50 hours, please and thank you, which is like how pretty much all of Ubisoft's other games are, to be honest. This one, it delivers a world that feels rich and full of shit to do, that's pleasant to be in on its own for its own sake, and it trusts you will figure out what you want to do next. All that feels good. So yeah, when I say mandatory stealth earlier, one thing that I will not cotton to, that I just don't do, is I really hate stealth games. I hate when a game requires me to, skulk about, hide, wait for some NPC characters to finish a conversation or have a smoke and then walk away. And then I have to be paying close enough attention to their route and what, where they walk around, so I can like sneak through, only to be spotted, through a wall because of some path tracing bug by some enemy, and then trip an alarm. And now it's like, oh, I'm battling an impossible number of bad guys. And even if I fucking kill them all, I'm going to have some wanted status, right? I hate games like this. I hate the puzzle box nature of them, where there's like a right way to walk through a fucking hallway. Why do I love this game? Like, why is this one working and those ones don't work? And I think that the answer is this game feels more like stealth games of the 90s, like Thief, where the underlying mechanics are the game. You are playing a game, and the modern stealth era, which I think kind of started, a lot of people would point to like the Metal Gear Solid series, especially MGS2, but like I would say like Splinter Cell with like the AAA style games on the original Xbox was like the worst at this, where it's like this punishing, like there is a correct way to go through every mission, and if you fuck up even the slightest thing, it's like bops you on the head and sends you back to the beginning. This game's just like it's not that it's more forgiving, although it sort of is. It's using your wits and looking around and not being a doofus is usually enough to get through the stealth parts of these levels. And so knowing that and having learned that from doing a few missions, you can go in and think, oh yeah, like as long as I'm, smart and thoughtful, I'll probably be okay. And I shouldn't just go in guns blazing because I'm wearing a leather chaps, and those don't protect against very many blaster shots, right? Yeah, great vibe. The fact that it doesn't just show you an arrow of like where to walk all the time, you can bring up a quasi arrow, but it's not particularly useful. Forces you to actually explore the environments a little bit more, even though it can be frustrating that until you learn how to read the map, it can be really confusing where the fuck you're supposed to be going at any given time. But I say that, but then yet last night I actually had a really good experience doing a side mission where I literally had to. I found myself. I spent like 30 fucking minutes circling an Imperial outpost in a mountain, and the only way in was straight through the front, and a frontal assault was not ending well for me, even when I managed to kill everyone. My wanted level was so high that they were just sending wave after wave of men at me, and I was like, that can't be the right way to do it. I found, oh look, if I climb this nearby mountain and then I rope over, and swing onto, swing off a tree branch, I can tumble over into the mountain where the base is, and then there's like a little vent, and I can go through the vent, and that's one way I can get into this base. Like, it manages to make stealth components and reward exploration like that in a way that is actually satisfying, and that's just something that's incredibly rare. Now, on top of that, if you're a Star Wars fan, if you like that that vibe at all, like having all of these game systems like deliver at a high level of quality, right? Like looks great, feels good, and I haven't experienced very many bugs at all. It's got an in-game sabacc, which is the Star Wars card game, and they're constantly throwing out new versions of this game that are slight reinventions. The version of the game that they created of the sabacc game that they created for Star Wars Outlaws is very well tailored to a single player kind of card game mode, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to mix things up between quests. Some quests are tied to you playing the sabacc game, and I never play the card games in these games. Like, what's the one in Gwent or whatever in The Witcher? These things are, because usually it's a collectathon and you're collecting a bunch of cards and you got to maintain a deck. And this is just like, no, this is a pretty simple fucking game, and here's the rules, and here's some ways you can cheat. Because your character is a scoundrel, right? You're like a Han Solo kind of character. Yeah, 2 big thumbs up. Other shit. I watched Welcome to Wrexham season 3. It was over in a hurry. I just watched season 2 a couple months ago, and I had to look it up. That was 15 episodes. Season 3 is only 8 episodes. And I think I know why, which is like they've mostly told the story. So now it's just, here's what's happening this season. It's still good. It's becoming just sort of it's a nice thing to have on the background. It's uplifting. It's fun. It's lighthearted, not too serious. Yeah. It makes me care about soccer. Makes me, the story of the sport without having to get all, Becky has a friend who's like going to a pub in the morning here so that they can watch a Liverpool game with the time change. And I can't drink that early. So this is the best substitute I've got. So yeah, if you haven't watched Welcome to Wrexham, definitely worth having on. Becky and I started watching Strange New Worlds. I'd seen it already. That's 2 seasons of, Star Trek captain with the good hair. Captain Pike for, 10 years was the captain of the Enterprise before Captain James Tiberius Kirk. And I don't think it's on like a goofy offshoot timeline. I think it's like the main canonical, what do they call it? Prime timeline of the Star Trek universe. But like, it's just like, straightforward ass episodic. Each episode is a different story, standalone thing that all the fans are always clamoring for because it gets you into the ethical dilemmas and the interesting kind of side stories and stuff. The disposability and the reset button are assets because each episode is like a little mini stage play. Characters are great. Acting is great. The visual fidelity, the production effects are awesome. How far we've come from a TV production perspective that in 2009 you'd have the J.J. Abrams Star Trek film. Compare that to just when did Enterprise wrap, like 2004, 2005. Like one looks like a TV show, one looks like a fucking movie. Nowadays, like, I mean, the most recent Star Trek stuff, say what you will about the quality of the productions and the scripts, it's been pretty hit and miss. Like, I don't know, what visual effects shops they're using, but like a lot of that stuff has a really cool pizzazz and good style. So Strange New Worlds, strongly recommended if you're even Star Trek curious. Becky and I are enjoying it. The Civil War movie, starring Nick Offerman for a grand total of like 28 seconds. Watch it for the Kirsten Dunst, not the Nick Offerman. It's on Max, so if you're a subscriber to the Max service, you can watch Civil War. It's a hypothetical of like, what if there was a civil war again in the United States? It's not a feel-good movie. It doesn't have a lot to say. It has as much to say about our current politics as Twisters had to say about climate change, which is nothing at all. And so what it's selling is a vibe, and the vibe is, ugh. But, it delivered on that, I guess. It executed that well. It looks like a movie that was lost in editing hell, where it probably originally was going to say something, and then there's just way too many sequences where it's just like, no, like literally, it's done for artistic effect in the final edit. But there's all these scenes of people screaming and yelling and talking, and the voices are muted, and there's just dramatic music overlaid. And I wondered more than a few times, like, I wonder if like that's because they just had to change this plot so dramatically to get this thing released. So yeah, for the low price of, you're already paying $15 for Max because you're a fucking moron like me, you too can watch Civil War and kind of just have a despondent evening where you drink way too much rum. But I don't regret it. I'm glad I saw it. It looks like the movie version of one of the worst Call of Duty campaigns. Like, what was it? Modern Warfare 3, not the newest Modern Warfare 3, but the original Modern Warfare 3 in like 2011 or whatever, where it's like you're fighting in DC and the Russians nuke it or whatever the fuck. It's like that level of comically over the top. But man, it really commits to the bit of like, this is a movie about nothing. It's about what it would look like. Which is, I know reviews were really rough for this movie because I think a lot of people wanted it to have a perspective or an angle, and that it definitely seems cowardly that it seems to have no fucking opinions, or editorialization. But that said, like, a lot of the visual effects are very impressive. The tension in the film is authentic and serious, pretty much throughout. It's just, it'll leave you feeling hollow. And I maybe that's what a lot of the reviewers missed, but like, I think you feeling hollow was the point. And, the through line here is like a cautionary tale. So if you're thinking about starting a civil war, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to empathize. I'm just going to say, don't fucking start a civil war, because this movie made it look like not as much fun as that sounds. Just putting that out there. And if you need a convincing, maybe they've still got free trials for HBO Max. I don't know. And that thus concludes today's recommendations.
You've got mail.
Let's take a look at the mailbag. I got one from Ali here. He says, hey, here's Ali. Hey, Ali. I'm still listening to your podcast, but I don't have anywhere near enough time. I'm currently halfway through one of the June changes. There are fun sides to listening to your podcast with long delay, seeing some of your short-term predictions age like milk, or, for example, not having to wait too long to see the Weird Ruby Code keynote on YouTube after your recommendation. I just wanted to say I still enjoy your podcast and hope that you keep it up. Also, despite mentioning it more than once, I'm surprised that no one has corrected you yet that the actor on the sad Pablo Escobar meme is not Pedro Pascal, but a Brazilian actor named Wagner Moura. I guess you're not as popular in Brazil as you are in Argentina. I really like your anecdotes about Japan. Do you also have travel stories worth mentioning from other countries? Oh, and Ali will be at Rails World. So Ali, I look forward to seeing you at Rails World. Thank you for the correction. I welcome corrections. Normally, if you just send me a correction and not a compliment, I will disregard it. So be sure if you do have a correction that you include some form of flattery, because it helps the medicine go down. And this has got enough of that I was able to acknowledge that, yes, that is not Pedro Pascal. It's another person. So sorry if anyone was offended by my inaccurate portrayal of what that meme is. That a large number of you listening probably don't. The meme is not coming to mind. That was not Pedro Pascal. We regret the error. Do you also have travel stories worth mentioning from other countries? I absolutely have been to other countries. I've been to quite a lot of countries. Unfortunately, most of the countries I've been to has been to give a conference talk. And so I can tell you all about a lot of airports, and then business hotels, and then convention centers. And, not a ton of really meaningful, apart from just sort of, very kitschy touristy shit where you go to the thing and then you check it off your list of places you've been. One that comes to mind is I did, there's a cool, the name of the program is Walk Shop, WALK shop, like a workshop, but for walking, that some friends of mine have been putting on for a while. And, they're like retreats for business leaders and aspiring business leaders, to pair off, and on a multi-day hike. And so each day you hike, maybe find a new buddy, and have asynchronous conversations because you're way outside cellular signal. You're traveling, every night you hole up in a different town. And I did the Black Forest in southern Germany with them, and, fantastic experience exploring southern Germany. Beautiful, of course. It's where all the little fairy tale castles are and stuff. And food's great, especially if you like Wiener Schnitzel, which I do. It is cruel to eat veal, but if you're going to do it in style, I say. And to do it in a way where we were hiking through a lot of the mountains was really enjoyable, because it's just, apart from being beautiful, it really, it delivered on the promise of being a great place to have conversations and being kind of thrown in a blender with other people. It also happened to be Oktoberfest, so I drank a little too much, and I've got some stories about a night that I did drink too much, and even I have the hypervisory process that's telling me not to tell a couple of these stories. I will say one. So I was on an iPhone without signal, but I had a PDF of like the guide one day, this town that we were traveling, or this hike that we were doing. And me and the fella that I was walking with, we got confused because of the use of the word gazebo, I want to say. Was it gazebo? There was a word that he and I saw a structure, but it didn't look, I want to say gazebo. It didn't look like a gazebo to us. It looked like some other structure. But like the PDF guide, which lacked for very many images, was apparently referring to that as the gazebo. And it was like, and behind this, there's like a little, like a switchback down the mountain, right? But we're like, well, that's not it, right? I don't think that's it. And so we kept walking, and we kept walking, and we kept walking. And then a couple hours had passed, and then it was starting to get dark. And we're like, yeah, we haven't. And the thing about it, right? So if we had just missed that one marker, we wouldn't have walked for 2 fucking hours not seeing the next one. But then we saw one that was like very passably the next one. It was like, oh, and then the next one is this. Oh, that must be that. Okay, cool. And we find another one. I think we found 2 or 3 that we were able to rationalize ourselves into saying, oh yes, like we're still on the we're still on the goal, the right path here. And, we didn't have GPS, didn't have, I had offline maps and I could see where I was sort of, but like, it's not that helpful. It's like, yes, like we're deep in the mountain over here and then we're deep in the mountain over there. Like, I don't really know relatively, because you're twisting around all these switchbacks up and down a mountain. I had no idea whether or not that was further or closer to the hotel that we were meeting at. So it starts getting dark. He starts getting tired. He mentions randomly, oh yeah, by the way, I got a health condition that like if my heart rate gets up too high, I'll pass out. And I'm starting to get pretty like exerted. And I was like, this is a super cool thing for you to mention to me right now, bub. I have problems enough as it is. We're both hungry, no food, running out of water. I'm not going to die, right? Like we will survive. But it's wildernessy enough that we haven't seen anyone for now quite a while. We decided, well, we could turn around, but even if we turn around, it's not like we saw some other way to be going. Again, because we misunderstood what the fuck a gazebo apparently looks like in this culture. And so we would not have known to look behind it to find some, path downward. So a ton of time. We lost a ton of time. We were super late. I think we were supposed to be done with the hike by like 4 or so, and most people were already showered and relaxed. And then it started raining. So we were exposed. It's raining. It's getting muddy and slick. Because of course the paths that we'd been going down were less well traveled because they weren't on any routes that anyone had ever seen before. Eventually we did figure it out. It just took a lot of trial and error. It was very frustrating. We got back, I think, 45 minutes after dinner would have started. 7:45, 8 p.m. maybe. These were early mornings too, so we were pretty quickly cutting into what would have been our sleep time. Exhausted, dirty. Made it back though. And it wasn't about being late. I mean, that's what I remember now as being late. It was the low-key horror that like, this is the embarrassing way that I'm going to die. I'm going to get lost on a low-stakes hiking excursion in the middle of the Black Forest because like I've got no cell signal and I'm with somebody if he saunters at more than a brisk walk will pass out. Yeah. So that wasn't in Japan. See you in Toronto, Ollie. Next question, written from Jesse. I'd be interested to hear more about justin.searles.co. What's the tech stack? How's the data structured? How do you create content for your site? Do you go back and look at the content? So if you've been to my website, justin.searles.co, it is a Hugo site, which is a static site generator. It is hosted on Netlify. Netlify is a sort of Heroku-like platform for static sites, sometimes called Jamstack, where it's not actually running a continuously operating application server. Rather, it has a get receive hook or a GitHub build. A GitHub push event can trigger a build. It'll then spin up a little worker. It'll run the Hugo binary, which will take a whole bunch of Markdown and Golang templates in the Go programming language, compile those down to HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then push those files, flat files. What Netlify really has is a big edge network of CDNs, right? A CDN. So once it pushes that out, then you just got a already, delivery optimized static site. The reason I use Netlify and the reason I use Golang is it's really fast. I don't have to think very hard about distribution, and it's decoupled from other tools like GitHub Pages is perfectly fine. And then nowadays you can use arbitrary builders with it. But back in the day, like GitHub Pages kind of married you to Jekyll and you didn't have as much flexibility with domain names and cores and other things. So I like quite a lot. If you're building a static website, having it hosted statically without a server-side component, if possible, ideally have flat files be the content. and because every time you need to change them, you could just as well commit to Git and push it up, as opposed to have a CMS that's got a dynamic database that's driving the content, and then you need to have a caching layer in front of it. It's just architecturally that's more complicated, which is why we're talking about Squarespace for Becky's site, because we've tried the Hugo and the Markdown and the Git thing, but it's just fiddly enough that she doesn't roll with it. So I that's the bulk of what it is. If you were to pull down my repo, you'd see that like I have spent years tweaking and adding custom little partials and trickeries to the various things. Like my site does not look like a lot of Hugo sites. You look at the sidebar, and I have created kind of custom layouts for all these different multimedia types, whether that's like everything from texts and link posts and photo posts to, of course, this podcast is delivered as its own media type here. The emails are also my email newsletter is also available, permalinked up there. The spots, which are my little place maps, so using the Apple Maps JavaScript API. So all the data is just in Git. Every single one of those posts is a Markdown file. The search is done by PageFind, which is a JavaScript, like an NPM sort of package you would install. And so that's one of the scripts that runs at build time. It looks at all those Markdown files, or rather it looks at all the compiled HTML files. And then it creates an index, and then that index is deployed as a flat file that can be fetched via an AJAX request. So you start typing, and then it'll make a range request on that index to just grab the part that it needs for you to get some search results, which I think is really splendid, because then I've got decently functioning search without needing a server-side component for that. Now, why this makes sense for Netlify as a business, I don't really get it. It's basically free as long as you don't need any server-side stuff, and there's a way to engineer out the need for server-side stuff in almost all cases. So I pay them $0, and they do a fantastic job hosting the site. And I get like almost a terabyte of traffic, I think, a month, which seems like a lot for a site that's mostly text. And, it's not like I host the podcast there. They're just in an S3 bucket. Additionally, something that I do that's very special and very unusual, and maybe I'll spend more time showing this off at some point, is I have custom Apple shortcuts for all of the most common media types, including like what I call takes, or like my little like tweet-like length things. I just launch that from my phone. I'll fire it off into a little dialog and a shortcut, hit OK. And then using working copy, which is a Git client for iOS, it will pull down the latest from Justin Searles Go, create a new file for me in the format that I need, populate that Markdown file, put it in the right folder, put it on the right date, and then git add, git commit, git push, and then it's done. So like in one action as a user, I just type a fire and forget tweet-like thing and hit go. It'll be on my website within 3 minutes. And with the syndication that I have downstream, and I guess that's the other part of the tech stack, is I've got several different syndicators. One is a GitHub action that posts to Twitter very irregularly because it sucks. One that is feed to Toot that goes to Mastodon. One is feed to Thread, which goes to Threads. That's one that I wrote. And then feed to Gram, which is another one I wrote that will take the photo shots and put them in Instagram. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Jesse. I once I'm on the other end of this Rails World talk, I'll probably invest more time, because at that point I'll be more interested in really investing in this media empire that I'm building for all Justin and Searles related pieces of content. All your latest Justin Searles news that's fit to print. Let's see. How are we doing on time? Casey Brandt. Fuck. Not supposed to say the last name. Casey doesn't care. I've decided unilaterally Casey doesn't care. Hey, Casey. How's it going? I've been happy to hear you speak with some degree of nuance about AI coding assistance on your podcast. It really does seem like the latest example of programmers having a generally very hard time introspecting accurately about which practices are helping and which are not. A few months ago, I was watching a video course where the presenter had Copilot or a similar tool enabled in VS Code. It was constantly popping up suggestions as he typed. He almost never took the suggestions because usually they weren't what he wanted. Sometimes he would accept the code, but then he'd have to edit almost all of it immediately. Rarely, he would accept a large suggestion that had a subtle bug, and the class would be derailed for 5 minutes while he had to figure it out. And most rarely of all, it would offer a suggestion that was what he wanted, and he would accept it. As a viewer, it made the presentation much harder to follow because all of this extra text kept flickering in and out of existence. And as a presenter, I could definitely tell it was making his job harder because his train of thought was being interrupted more or less constantly. But despite the fact that he rejected the suggestions 98% of the time, despite the fact that 98% of what he did accept, that those 2% were often wrong, and when that 2% of 2% was right, the instructor made a point of stopping his lecture to marvel at how great a tool this was. Holy cow, look at that. That AI is really something, huh? No, watch your own recording back, you goof. This is still Casey talking. This course would have been like half as long without this garbage. So now, do I think that these Copilot tools are helpful to some programmers some of the time? Of course, obviously they must be. But this course was a crystal clear example that you really can't trust a programmer self-reporting about this stuff. This guy was clearly being hindered pretty dramatically in some moments by this tool, yet he never complained about its failings and always marveled when it was marginally helpful. Anyway, thanks for this opportunity to rant a little bit. So I mangle a little bit of the math there about the 98% and 98%, but that's just... Yeah, this is pretty bang on, man. Like, these tools can be better. They're getting better. Super Maven, the hit rate is like, call it 8% instead of 2% for me. It's enough to be like, ooh, nice. And it's at its best when I'm doing drudgery. Like, oh God, I got to go and edit 5 of these items in this list, and they're all like long hashes, and it would be a lot of typing, right? Or I got to do make the same change to 5 class strings in my HTML, and when I tab through, it'll just do it correctly. Now, like, my trust level is low enough that the next thing that I do is I go and check Git, and I make sure that like it didn't fuck up somehow in the transcription. And usually when it is just drudgery, it's usually doing that right. But like, I've been working with this shit for almost 2 years now. Wait, have I? Yes, 2 years. And it's taken a long time to dial in my relationship with it, including just acclimating to having tab complete be, extremely distracting as it flickers in and out of existence, like you said. I worry that the way Casey describes this is the vast majority of programmers' experience. All it takes is one time for it to be impressive, and you forget about the, like, it's like the autonomous car drives you to the park successfully once, and you're like, wow, we're in the future. And then, as if it were crashing you every other time. And you're like, well, yeah, but still pretty impressive. I don't know what to do with this though, right? Like I definitely don't recommend using software on the promise that it's going to be useful someday. Like, wait till it's useful and then use it. I think it would be really interesting to come up with a way to put harder numbers behind this, because even your 98% and 2% are guesses, right? And as an observer, you're seeing it with kind of frustrated eyes, right? Because like as an external observer, like you are frustrated by the thing's existence for sure, and that's valid to be, because I agree it's super distracting. Cyril's After Dark, I had Copilot turned on, and I got a lot of the same feedback. But like part of Cyril's After Dark, which is a YouTube series of me coding, part of the whole shtick was I was going to like go out of my way to use too much AI crap. My takeaway here is it would be interesting, and for anyone who's passionate about this, it'd be interesting to design an experiment that maybe did use screen monitoring or a live stream recorder like Rewind AI or something like that to like actually analyze footage after the fact to understand, and to go back and do the play-by-play too, especially because the most insidious is when you have it generate a test for you or something, or generate a whole function, and then you only realize minutes and hours later that it was subtly fucked, and that if you'd written it yourself, you wouldn't have subtly fucked it and it would have worked. Those expeditions are by far the most demoralizing, and it's the closest I ever get to turning this stuff off. But I don't know. maybe I'm insufficiently introspective. Maybe I'm just lonely, working by myself. I don't know. Maybe I should try a cleanse and just go without it for a couple weeks and see how I feel. That might be like the most cost-effective thing I can do. Well, speaking of going without it, it's going to be a couple weeks until I get to chat with y'all again. It'll be on the other side of our Rails World conference. I hope my talk goes well. If you're listening to this because I advertised it in the conference, hi, hello from the past. It's me, Justin, your friend. I'm going to definitely try to advertise this during the conference talk. Hey, do you like this 30-minute talk? Here's a 3-hour fucking version that's less polished. Yeah. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you succeed at all of your things and that, that you remember that you're good enough, but your work never is. And that's all I got to say.